My wife cheated, so I reunited with her former best friend. Now, we're creating the life she's always desired. I have never felt that someone should be the larger person in life. If someone wrongs you on purpose and is aware of what they are doing, still did it, and you were harmed in the crossfire, then you have even less reason to be a greater person, even if it takes years to exact your revenge. In my instance, I did not need to wait years, but I'm glad I didn't hold back from confronting the adultery and calling my wife. And I'm delighted that my retribution led me down a much better path for myself. So I, 35, was married to my ex-wife, 32, for 6 years until a few weeks ago, and we had been dating for 3 years prior. For the purposes of this discussion, I will just refer to her as Lily. I was at a party hosted by one of my friends, and she was pals with one of his friends. That meant my friend didn't know very much about her, so I decided to try my luck and approach her. She was quite attentive and had a terrific sense of humor, which was what drew my attention beyond her appearance. From there, we began dating, and everything went smoothly. Then, 3 years after our marriage, I proposed, and that was it. However, over our 6-year marriage, one thing I saw about her was that once she decided she didn't like someone, they could do everything they could to get back in her good books. But it wouldn't mean anything in that sense. I tried to talk to her about it, but it didn't go very well. But fortunately, that aspect of her rarely dealt with me, so it was easy for me to let it go. I'm highlighting that negative trait of hers because it plays an important role in all of this. To make things clear, I need to describe a lady named Daisy. Daisy and Lily used to be pretty close friends. They were as close as they could be, according to what she told me back then. It appeared to be a really healthy connection, and it was the type of friendship I aspired to. The situation began when there was some sort of miscommunication. I honestly don't remember the facts, and Lily didn't give Daisy the benefit of the doubt for her conduct. To be honest, I remember concluding that Daisy was incorrect, but not in a spiteful way. It appeared that something had gone wrong, and someone had been offended. Daisy, of course, tried to apologize, but my stubborn ex-wife refused to hear anything she said. That should have been a red flag for me, as the two of them had known each other for longer than I had known Lily. However, it was so simple for her not to give her friend the benefit of the doubt. Looking back, it seems that Lily was trying to capitalize on Daisy's offense against her. But if you do that, you can expect the individual to come and apologize. However, Lily did not appear to want that, as she refused to accept your apologies even after you tried every day for a year. At that time, I had to cease speaking with Daisy. I won't say we were very close, but I found her to be a pleasant person. Talking to her was enjoyable, and she shared many of the same interests as Lily and me, so she could easily tag along on a variety of occasions. I had to let her go, though, since I didn't want to be in the thick of that kind of conflict. It was clear how ugly things could get when Lily suddenly started talking down to Daisy and revealing her personal details. I would be lying if I said I wasn't disgusted by such behavior back then. But again, this was my wife. It was one of the many things I still liked about her. And looking back, I recognized that the environment I was in with her was unhealthy because it made it difficult to confront her. That doesn't mean the confrontation never happened, but it does mean that I had to be very careful with the words I used, since I didn't want her to think I might be a victim of hers, and she'd never realize how wrong she was. So now you have a good understanding of Daisy and how she and my ex-wife stopped talking. Now, the more recent issue arose when I made a silly error at home. I messed up in the kitchen and ruined something, and Lily became enraged, so I offered to replace it because it was replaceable, but she refused to hear what I had to say. She kept yelling and throwing a tantrum, which annoyed me. So the next thing I knew, I retorted, and a whole nasty dispute began. It lasted about an hour, and by the end, I'd ceased saying anything to her. I couldn't keep adding gasoline to the flames, especially because I felt like I was talking to a wall. She went upstairs, came back down, dressed, and walked out of the house. I'm sure she expected me to say something, but I refused to. She sought to compel me to talk or stop her from leaving the house, which I found ridiculous. What happened to trying to communicate as adults? I know it was my fault since I was aware of her red flag when it came to confrontation, and I did very little to avoid having to deal with it, whether by leaving her butt or putting my foot down. She returned home at 3 a.m., visibly inebriated. She looked a complete mess, which irritated me even more because she knew what she was doing the entire time. She prepared to leave the house, but she failed to consider returning home in a manner that did not make her appear like a teenager who had consumed alcohol. I dislike it when people can't control their alcohol consumption and drink until they lose their senses. I asked her where she was coming from, but her only reaction was to give me the middle finger and go upstairs. I suppose I was too angry at that time to say anything, so I followed her up the stairs and kept asking where she was coming from. I mean, I am pleased I was following her up the stairs because she lost her footing and went backwards, and she was quite fortunate that I was there to save her. It was an awful shame for me. We eventually made it upstairs, and I asked her the question again as she lay down on the bed, still fully dressed. Now, I'm not sure what she said because it was so muted, but it sounded like, "Believe me, you do not want to know." That was not what her husband wanted to hear when she returned home, completely drunk and dressed inappropriately. She fell asleep, and when I tried to rouse her up, she was basically unconscious. So I realized there was no use in my trying. Beyond that, I would address her in the morning. But, knowing that she was unlikely to wake up anytime soon, I had a sense I should look through her phone to see if I could get a better notion of where she had gone that night. It just took me a second after entering her gallery to notice that she had gone to a club with one of her friends. The night began with images of the two of them, but as soon as they were at the club, the same guy began to appear in her shots repeatedly. The images ended at the club, so I didn't know what happened after that, but the last picture was shot 2 hours before she returned home. So I felt compelled to know what transpired in the time that remained. I checked her text messages because I knew she went out with a friend at some time, which I believe happened while she was upstairs. She had messaged that pal saying, "Let's go out. I need to leave this house. He's being an asshole." Following that, the friend answered, excitedly discussing how long it had been since then. "What kind of atmosphere do you prefer? The sort that makes him jealous?" Needless to say, that aspect irritated me because it demonstrated how conscious she was when making these terrible mistakes. The entire problem began when I accidentally screwed up one of her little kitchen gadgets, and I apologized and attempted to set things right. But her response was to purposefully attempt to harm me as much as she could in that moment. It seemed so tragic to me now. If Lily's evil friend had not decided to be so wholesome at the end of the night, I would have had no idea what had transpired. I think I went home with some eye candy. Please stay safe tonight. Text me when you arrive home. I believe I was able to put together all of the pieces with that portion. She went to the club with her friend in an attempt to make me jealous. She met a guy there, according to all meanings I could think of. That night, she undoubtedly slipped by her friend and went home with that guy. Who knows? Maybe you got wasted before leaving, and most likely sleeping with him. I mean, there was absolutely no reason for me to assume she hadn't slept with him. Her friend's text message arrived more than an hour before she returned home, which didn't make sense unless she went to the club on the other side of town. She had to have gone somewhere else, and I knew it had to be that guy's place. The problem was, I wanted to bash the idiotic guy's face in, but I had no idea who he was, and I was quite sure she didn't either. That just made things worse for me. It had to be some random person that she chose to ruin our marriage with. Then I started thinking about everything that had happened between them. And yes, I believe I wanted to break something at that moment. I started vigorously shaking her to urge her to wake up, but no matter how hard I tried, she didn't move beyond a sleepy grunt. I gave up and went downstairs to try to sleep. Obviously, That did not work for me since I was overthinking it. I despise it when it appears that your entire life is about to change in an instant, and I despise it much more in this case since it was going to change because to a silly trigger. The point is, I realized that even if the trigger was stupid, if someone was prepared to cheat on me so casually, it meant that I shouldn't have been with that kind of person in the first place. I'm sure you can see by my reaction that I was not about to keep what I had discovered to myself. I went off on her as soon as she came downstairs in the morning. I asked her again what she did the night before, and she appeared to consider whether to lie or not, before claiming she wanted to go clubbing with her friend. I asked her whether that was it, and she answered it was. I mentioned how intoxicated she was the night before, and she didn't appear to remember much. That was hardly surprising given her current state, as she couldn't even verify anything. I decided to entice her in. In your intoxicated state, you acknowledged to me that you cheated on me. As soon as I mentioned it, she perked up and began shaking her head, screaming, "Never again." I mean, if I had known she had gone home with someone, her reaction would have revealed everything. If I had accused her of that when she hadn't cheated on me, the reaction would have been far more hostile than what I received. She was going for potential damage control. I informed her that there were photos on her phone showing her in bed with the guy. She grabbed her phone quickly and appeared worried as she dashed to her gallery. When she didn't see anything like what I described, she asked what I was talking about. I questioned her why she needed to check to see if those photographs were still there, knowing she hadn't done anything the night before. She claimed it could have happened while she was drunk. I asked her why. As a married woman, she went to the club and got so drunk that someone could have slept with her and she wouldn't remember. She had nothing to say about it at that point. I was weary of playing games, so I told her that I had seen her images, that she had gotten cozy with the guy at the club, and that I had seen her friend's text message which practically showed that she had gone home with him. I highlighted how long it took from when she received that text to when she returned home, and how she had clearly been elsewhere. She truly had nothing to say about it. I just told her that it was wonderful that we both knew the truth, and I informed her right away that I wanted a divorce. She was speechless, which didn't surprise me. It was much better than her begging me. At that point, I simply walked out and drove for quite some time. During the way, I pulled over and began searching for a competent divorce attorney. I ultimately located one, went into his office, and paid a retainer. I was not going to give her any space to try to bring me back. I didn't want any part of it. When I returned home, she started pleading. I suppose she had had time to think about it, and she understood how much she didn't want to lose what we had. She was definitely trying to tug on my heartstrings when she began talking about all of our future plans. What about the children we wanted to have? What about traversing the world and visiting Cambodia at the end of the year? What about the dream retirement home we hoped to build? I said all of this. She was bawling her eyes out. I'll admit that I felt a tinge of regret about how all those plans would vanish into thin air, but I refused to accept responsibility for it. The next day, I left the house and found a motel to stay in. I couldn't stay in the same house with her any longer, even if it meant sleeping on the couch far away. Fortunately, it didn't take long to create the divorce papers, and after they were completed, I had them delivered to her via process server while she was working. Obviously, she was upset about it, but it simply made me smile. All the drama, despite the fact that I had loved this person just a few weeks earlier. It was not difficult for me to harbor such great resentment for her. I believe it was out of resentment that I determined to do something worse. Daisy was the person who irritated her the most. The poor woman was no longer present in her life, but any mention of Daisy indicated that something bad would happen. There could have been more to the story than Lily let on, as her reactions were typically out of proportion. However, Daisy had returned to academia following their time in college and was doing quite well for herself, so there could have been some jealousy at work. I decided to contact Daisy, and it had been so long since our previous conversation that my first name was insufficient for her to remember who I was. The addition of her last name did the trick, and she appeared to be really pleased to hear from me. She's always been quite sweet. We made some small conversation, and when she asked about Lily, I was pleased to inform her that we were getting divorced. She paused briefly before offering her apologies. I told her I would love to meet up and catch up. She had no problem with that. So Daisy and I met up at a neighborhood cafe to catch up. I enjoyed it far more than I expected. I believe I was seeing Daisy in a completely new light, not just because I had sought her out to make my soon-to-be ex-wife jealous, but also because the fact that I was about to divorce allowed me to see her as a potential. We talked for approximately 2 hours and ended with an embrace, which felt great. I had really missed her. From that moment forward, we began to communicate with one another, and that one meeting evolved into us, and we now speak almost every day. Now, before I get into Daisy and my situation, I need to go over the entire divorce tale. I won't bore you, but I had to leave the house, even given the evidence I tried to provide. The difficulty was that my evidence was based on a lot of assumptions, which did not necessarily aid my argument in the way I hoped. There was no evidence she was unfaithful, but according to the judge, giving away the house saved me alimony, for which I should be grateful. Lily and I seldom spoke at that point unless it was about the aftermath of the divorce. Since I was free, I started hanging out with Daisy a lot more than I used to, and I enjoyed every minute of it. She was practically the perfect woman, and the fact that we could argue and not hate each other at the end was very important to me. I'm not sure where it came from, but one day, I went to kiss her, and she returned it. That's when we began dating. We were quite quiet about it, so Lily had no idea we were together. That is, until we traveled to Cambodia together. Yes, the same Cambodia that was in our plans. I shared images of Daisy and I, and to say Lily was upset would be an understatement. She called me every name under the sun. She was obviously furious. She began to post extremely precise messages on Facebook that were plainly intended to reference us. She also stated that Cambodia was something we were destined to do together, and that I went with Daisy despite her. I mean, that was only somewhat correct. I was going to go away to get my mind off of her, but it was even better if I did so with my new girlfriend. Daisy stated that she had received threatening texts from Lily as well, but that they had been friends for long enough for such things to not bother her. Quite spontaneously. Daisy has adjusted. Then we took a trip to Thailand, and I only agreed because it was something I actually wanted to do. It had nothing to do with spitting on someone, but it was undoubtedly a perk. When I captured it, it appears like Daisy and I may need to create a trip blog. I'll admit that was partly done to irritate her because it was always something she laughed about. She was definitely in anguish as she saw me recover and realized who she probably despised the most. Her old best pal. Obviously, with my house gone, I moved in with Daisy and everything has gone smoothly. We are optimistic about the future because we are doing well together. At some point, I will propose, and children will enter the picture. I can't wait to be a father. I am going to continue living my best life with her, and if what I do with Daisy offends Lily, it's just part of the job. All I know is that I'm as joyful as possible, and she is continuously enraged. Seeing myself happy with Daisy, that works great for me. The way Lily turned a tiny quarrel into a full-fledged night of planned spite reveals a lot about her personality, or lack thereof. I mean, really. It sounds like this was already on fire, and she just decided to give it oxygen. Whatever her loss or your gain, she wanted to make you jealous. Congratulations, Lily. Mission completed. Here's the next story. Mike hurled his graduation cap into the air among the other graduates of St. Petersburg High School's 2020 class, John F. Kennedy. Similar joy at the conclusion of one phase of his life, as well as anguish at the fact that he would never again visit these hallowed gates as king of the hill. For many years, it appeared that his entire existence had been focused on this one occasion. But now what? How did school prepare him for the real world? What will he and the other 52 former high school classmates do with their newfound freedom? In the immediate term, nothing particularly noteworthy occurred. His girlfriend, Jessica, the shy girl he'd been dating for the previous 2 years, shouted loudly over the noise and rush and bustle of the gym to catch his attention. "Mike, let's snap a few shots while we have time," she remarked, waving her hand and letting her customary crown of red hair flutter over her face. He made his way through a sea of cell phones and relatives, taking photos of graduates to where Jessica stood off to the side with 6 or 7 classmates wearing matching robes. "Hey, Montgomery, show your nasty face for the story," Mike teased Adam Diggs, the tall, slender receiver with whom he had been passing and catching since joining the senior squad in 10th grade. They exchanged broad smiles and placed their arms over each other's shoulders in a brotherly fashion. Everyone raised their phones, cameras flashed, but not brightly enough to blind Michael. "I will miss you the most, buddy." "Good luck in Oregon," he told his teammate Adam, who had gotten a 4-year athletic scholarship, hugged Mike fiercely. He truly stated that they were mutually brother rockets in Minnesota. "Just remember, when we both went pro in 4 years. I want to catch your touchdown throws. Let us blow up the league." Jessica interrupted the male-friendly idol, saying, "First, he needs to get an education." This was true. Mike, of course, attended a large out-of-state university. But unlike Adam, he had to make ends meet on a partial scholarship and a part-time job. The only consolation was that his sweetheart would also be studying there. "Don't remind me of that right now, honey," he whispered, kissing Jessica's temple. "First, we must arrange a celebration that will outperform all others," stated huge striker Matt Crockett, surging into their group and nearly crushing everyone with his powerful hug. "Everything is in order. Friends, so at least your priorities are in order." Jessica laughed. Matt, who would most likely go work with his father at the local used car company after school, extended a grateful finger to her. "Almost always correct, honey," he said with a wink. Mike rolled his eyes and couldn't help but smile. The lineman's unrealized crush for Jessica was the darkest secret of their entire training career. Of course, nothing came of it, but Matt continued to pursue his attempts. "Be careful what you say, or I'll accuse you of harassment," she said, sticking out her tongue. Even though Jessica was plainly joking, Mike thought the idea was ridiculous. He believed that women should be respected, yet he had more traditional beliefs. Real men care for their women and take on responsibilities as necessary. Overly independent ladies who despised the mere presence of a man were not drawn to him at all. "What will they do? Will I be expelled from school?" "It's too late," Matt remarked, pushing up his chest and approaching the other athletes. Michael was approached by his parents, Charles and Caroline Montgomery. "We are extremely proud of you," his mother exclaimed, hardly holding back tears of delight. She approached her kid and hugged him, kissing his cheek. "Oh, Mom, you're embarrassing me," Mike complained softly. "Oh, I know just when to take a memento photo," his father said, taking out his iPhone. Charles Montgomery's equipment was soon oriented straight at his son, and he began capturing countless photos. "Kodak moment," inquired Adam, who had overheard the conversation. "What is this anyway?" Mike grinned as his seemingly archaic notions made themselves felt again. How could you not know what a Kodak moment is? It was his initial thought. It appeared like none of his peers understood how the world used to function. Mike was raised in the mindset of his parents' generation and at times felt more like a baby boomer than a millennial. However, based on his popularity and social standing, his peers still considered him one of their own. He finally said, "It's beyond your understanding." Jessica pretended to gasp as she turned to Adam. "Do you still consider yourself a graduate?" She spoke theatrically, placing her hands on her cheeks. "Hey, I never said I was going to be a rocket scientist. Adam said that with modern technology, this is unnecessary," Mike stated. Computers have automated everything to the point where the average individual no longer has to think much. Robots will take over everything in the near future. Jessica responded, I sense a note of contempt in your voice. Does this mean you will not purchase the smart car we discussed for our summer trip? Jessica knew Mike's fondness for the past and its slower pace, so she just taunted him. But Mike couldn't keep his sarcastic tone. These are soap bubbles, not automobiles. Real automobiles feature internal combustion engines that run on gasoline. They do not have expensive features like GPS or rear-view cameras. Sorry, but I'd rather drive a car than just sit in it. Wow. When did my boyfriend die, leaving a grouch in his place? She inquired with a grin. I'll have to forgive you, Montgomery, Adam replied, patting Mike on the back. Older automobiles will always be cool, like vintage TV series, movies, music, and everything else. Mike believed that in 2020 and the modern world in general, he was a stranger in a strange land. By the way, Diggs, how about we go to the party Crockett mentioned and relax one final time? He proposed. As if on cue, Adam fluttered his eyelashes and imitated a femme fatale. Would you like to come with me? What should I wear? Hands off. He is already taken. Jessica interposed, squeezing herself between them and grinning from ear to ear. Mike's parents returned from the group of grown-ups they had been speaking with. What have I heard about parties and drinking, son? Are you planning to drink today? Charles Montgomery spoke half humorously and half seriously. Come on, Dad. We are grown-ups. You always say that at your age. The age of majority was 18. Has anything changed significantly since then? Mike's question gave the elder Montgomery more pause than his son expected. Finally, he replied, Actually, yes. Much has changed. Your graduation today reminds me of mine, and how modern times have grown unrecognizable. I don't want to ruin your holiday, son, but it appeared that everyone was linked by genuine camaraderie and hope for the future. Maybe I'm getting older, but people nowadays appear angry, cynical, and divided for a variety of reasons. Nobody seems to understand how to enjoy the present anymore. Mike valued his father's words of wisdom. Although Adam and a few other players rolled their eyes behind Charles Montgomery's back, experience brings insight. He wished he could go back and see the good old days with his own eyes. It seems like the millionth time. Don't worry, Dad. I understand everything, he added truly. Charles Montgomery stared at his kid in a way that seemed to bridge the generation divide. To hell with everything. Graduation only occurs once. You're already an adult. My father once told me that you only have a short time on this planet, so make the most of it. Just be careful not to drive drunk. That is why we have a sober driver, Mike explained, pointing at Jessica. Thank you for nominating me as a volunteer, honey. His girlfriend pretended outrage. You are welcome, honey, he responded, attempting to imitate Humphrey Bogart's voice. As expected, none of his classmates got the humor. Just in case you want to avoid taking any chances. Mike followed his father's instructions and returned home in Jessica's almost new Dodge Ram. Crockett's high school graduation celebration turned out to be really rowdy. Friends who may never see one another again unless their homecomings are a blast. Mike's heart wasn't totally into the holidays. His father's words, together with his own concerns about the future, tormented him. Mike couldn't get rid of his bad thoughts throughout the evening, no matter how hard he tried. Jessica turned off the engine in her truck as they approached his residence. In the hush that followed, the blackness seemed more tangible. Is everything well, honey? You didn't seem to have as much fun at the party, she said from behind the wheel. This is the end of the road, Jess, Mike said. Her brow furrowed in the light from the dashboard. It is strange, I thought. Today was just a fork in the road, she remarked, tenderly brushing her fingers over his back hair. Yes, but where does this lead? He inquired, widening his hands. Did we just work hard for 12 years to get here? Jessica undid her seatbelt and opened the door. The light in the cabin went on. The startling lighting caused them both to blink. "I do not comprehend you. What's so wrong with that? We both attended the University of Minnesota, and we will even live together on campus. I'm going to study to be a veterinarian, and you will lead the Golden Gophers and Vikings to championships. We'll marry somewhere in the middle, have 6 children, and grow old with our extended families. Wasn't that the plan?" Mike exhaled and took a quick peek into her brilliant blue eyes. This was actually their plan, or rather her plan. Jessie Wilder. They had always felt that their fate was written in the stars when they first started dating. She was already escorting them down the aisle and naming their children long before they were adults. Mike tolerated this along with the uncertainties of college and the future. These notions stemmed from the concept of compromise, and Mike refused to accept anything less. At the very least, university should have provided an opportunity to explore oneself, meet new people, and attempt new things in the grand game of life. How was he expected to do this? What if Jessica was continuously observing his every move? "I wouldn't want it any other way," he finally admitted, delaying the discussion about their connection till later. Fortunately, Jessica didn't see his lack of seriousness. Instead, she focused on directing Mike and preventing him from falling down the stairs. However, the defender's dismal state pushed him to calm himself and stroll right to the door. "I believe that's all for today." "Good night," Jessica said. She gripped his hand, possibly to determine whether Mike was telling the truth. Crickets chirped. A mild May breeze shook the air, providing comfort after one of the rainiest days of the year. "What?" "Good night." "The night is only beginning." Mike grinned, squeezing her slim waist to convey his meaning. Jessica returned his smile, narrowing her gaze. "So, Mr. Montgomery, are you attempting to be arrogant?" "I don't know. Does it work?" he asked, kissing her just above the collarbone. "Perhaps," she whispered, shuddering from his touch. "How about your parents? How about them?" He shrugged his shoulders. When this did not satisfy her, he persisted. They left for the weekend. Dad mentioned something about going to a casino in northern Minnesota. Who knows? Perhaps they'll win enough money to cover the tuition gap. Then I could focus solely on school and football. "Dream," she replied. She then added something slightly flirtatious. "It is still early. Let's prepare some popcorn, watch a movie in the basement, and see where it takes us." The indication plainly suggested that the night will continue. "Great idea, honey," he replied, slipping the key into the lock. Jessica laughed quietly. "Darling, you always have such intriguing expressions. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say that. It's because you don't enjoy old movies." Mike thought they always discovered the most interesting phrases. "You have yet to see what I am capable of," he replied with a grin. "I convinced you," she replied, giving him a quick kiss. "Let us do this. You go relax and pick a movie, and I'll do the heavy work by making popcorn." He glanced at her in wonder. "So, who else is full of surprises? I believe I will agree with this proposal." Jessica went directly to the kitchen, while Mike turned left down the carpeted stairs into the equipped entertainment room. Cozy sofas, card tables, and a bar built by his father into one of the walls created a comfortable and cozy ambiance in the space. The centerpiece, however, was the 70-inch flat-screen television over the fireplace, which included an OLED display and internet streaming capabilities. The television represented the cutting edge of consumer technology. Mike took the universal remote control and watched vivid colors flash across the screen with almost dreamlike clarity. It was astonishing, he agreed, as apps for streaming movies and TV episodes appeared one after the other. He wasn't interested in Netflix, Hulu, HBO, or even YouTube TV. He was once again drawn to simplicity. He strolled up to the bookcase that also served as a DVD organizer. His parents organized everything by genre and even alphabetical order. Mike proceeded past the row of horror, comedy, and action pictures until he located a special location reserved for his favorite collection. The boxes labeled American Dreams were the first to capture his attention. Mike smiled as wide as he could whenever he remembered the teen drama of the early to mid-1960s, which was a groundbreaking concept for its time. Katharine Kennedy, the show's principal star, was widely regarded as the most popular entertainer of her period. Mike had goosebumps simply thinking about her. It seemed weird to fall in love with a man who had long since died. Katharine died in the late 1960s as a result of forbidden luck, but his affection simply got deeper. There was something about Katharine that made your heart race. Perhaps it was the way this woman, once hailed as America's sweetheart, handled herself with dignity and grace that defied her age. Perhaps it was all about her flawless American beauty, with long, flowing platinum hair, large blue eyes like moon discs, and a body that stole your breath away. She exuded charisma and filled any space she entered. Regardless, Mike had been her long-time admirer. "Well, I'm about 55 years late," he reflected, little saddened. The quarterback started looking at other films from Katharine Kennedy's career. Always a Bridesmaid. The Bell always rang twice. The Pride of the Nation. Almost all of them were in his possession. Each of these films became a blockbuster. Even her television show ranked first in the ratings, if he remembers correctly. Unfortunately, something went wrong. During the 4th season of American Dreams, the crown got too heavy for Queen Midas's head. Another nickname for Katharine, allegedly because everything she touched turned to gold, and she used illicit medications to ease stress. Soon, a clear reduction in the quality of her work on screen led to the show's cancellation after the season and a massive fall from grace. It was extremely terrible since she had transformed from a beautiful swan to something utterly different. Mike could still see old images from what was once a tabloid. Was it Constellation magazine, and how much she'd changed? The actress became practically unrecognizable after cutting off her magnificent golden hair and dressing in clothes typical of the shabby streets of the time. Katharine Kennedy, like many other superstars before and after her, sank into obscurity in Hollywood. After some consideration, Mike removed the Black Friday CD off the shelf. This picture was widely regarded as the best of the actress's career. Filmed at the height of her stardom, it also featured famed Western actor Alexander Bridges as the villain, a departure from his customary role. Mike had probably seen this movie 1,000,000 times, but Katharine Kennedy films were like sustenance for the soul, and classics are timeless. Mike decided, and Jessica showed up shortly after with more soul food. Just a different kind, holding a huge bowl of popcorn in both hands to avoid spilling it. Mike salivated as he grabbed 2 Mountain Dew cans from the little fridge on the side. They sat down on the sofa, nestled close together, and placed a dish between them. "Is this one of your older black and white films?" Jessica grimaced. "You watch these all the time. Can't we watch something from the 21st century? This is a color film. And no, why should I watch something from the year 2000? What if there were only superhero cartoons and films?" He pressed the play button on his remote control. The music is menacing. Under the opening credits, ominous music began to play. What is wrong with them? Jessica popped a few grains of popcorn into her lips. Mike followed suit. "Watching such pointless speech will turn your brain to mush." "This is a scientifically confirmed fact," he explained, chewing with his mouth full. "So, what's so wonderful about films that are so ancient that my parents don't watch them anymore?" The films of that era had a distinct rhythm, purpose, and presence that is now absent. Where have the first magnitude stars gone? For example, those dubbed stars in 2020 are folks I would not identify even in a 2-person lineup, even if their names were displayed in neon letters above their heads. Jessica considered this reasoning. Meanwhile, the film's hero, a faceless guy who appeared out of place next to giants like Catherine Kennedy and Alexander Bridges, entered the picture. Unfortunately, this simply strengthened her views. "Who is this? I've never seen him in my life," she remarked, pointing at the TV. Mike picked up the DVD cover and looked at the small characters on the back. Tony Iglesias finally read. Fortunately, he appears to be fine. Very cute in a retro look. Jessica, dressed in a police uniform, observed him more closely before looking at her boyfriend with narrowed eyes. "You're aware of the stereotype of Latin American lovers." He readily grasped her hint and moved his fingers to the base of her neck, where her brown hair began. "So, do you know what they say about real American men? When will we see what we want? We go for it." Mike resumed kissing her, despite a little shiver of pleasure as he confirmed his statements. Jessica chose to tease him a little. "Wait a minute, buddy. We live in the Me Too era. This means you can't touch me without my permission. To hell with it. Real men take anything they desire. Right now, I want you." Jessica was well aware of Mike's displeasure with recent discussions about women's emancipation, which he claimed stripped men of their masculinity. She did, however, enjoy teasing him on occasion. However, he was not going to stand for this anymore. The quarterback's only concern in the heat of the moment was how to satisfy their needs. "Mr. Montgomery, you are now behaving extremely inappropriately," Jessica stated. She squeezed more on one of his pressure spots. Mike persisted, however. "I am not going to be politically correct," he stated. "So, do you want to debate with me about gender issues, or will we get down to business?" Jessica said. But her words lacked zest, since her hormones were on the point of capitulation. Soon, both succumbed to yearning, and Black Friday was forgotten someplace in the recesses of their brains. Crap. "Where exactly did this come from?" Jessica asked him. He was not foolish. Mike thought, "There's no way I'm going to tell her about my secret famous crush." Instead, he used a workaround. It's simply adrenaline from the fact that we were finally released. "We don't have classes until September," he explained. "Laptops? Honey, nobody reads books anymore." Jessica replied, noting his doubtful expression. She said, "Does this mean you finally stopped being gloomy and depressed?" Mike watched Jessica recover her strewn things and get dressed. He didn't think it was a good idea to discuss catastrophic notions about the modern world after such intimate contact. So he decided to steer the conversation in a different direction. "Will you spend the night? I have a king-sized bed upstairs that might already have your name on it." He winked. "Normally I would reject, but times are changing. I am already an adult, just like you. What can my parents do?" "Forbid me." She grinned. The young couple sat down on the couch again, this time to watch Black Friday Jessica. Oddly enough, I tried to focus on the plot and the film's slower pace. Mike wanted to emphasize that this was a result of an era when people still knew how to pause and enjoy the moment, but chose to let the film speak for itself. As the credits began to scroll on the screen, Mike noticed her peaceful slumber and grinned. Jessica's leg rested easily on his thigh, and her red hair blended in with the sofa's burgundy armrest. He debated merely covering her with a blanket, but instead chose to be her personal prince, and carried her upstairs in his arms. As he reached his second-floor room, he saw a collection of trophies from various sports. One of them had a sign that read 2019 Wisconsin Football State Champions Class 2AA. The other listed 2020 baseball silver medalists at the high school state tournament, and so on. Mike may have taken great satisfaction in these awards, but they now felt like relics of the past for the University of Minnesota. They held absolutely no meaning. He fought the impulse to give up his future and Jessica's future as well. But gloomy thoughts like weighty monsters weighed on his shoulders. The quarterback, or rather the previous quarterback, wished to return to a simpler time, return to the light of glory, where the entire school admired him, Ride the white horse again and become a hero. However, without a time machine, all of this was a fantasy. Nothing like this will occur. Time machine. Mike thought that would be an idea. His mind began to drift away, to a world where magic could repair anything. It was only later that his head struck the cushion. Next to Jessica, he knew he was falling into a fantasy world. But dreams later, his journey began. Was it Independence Day? Mike noticed tiny flashes of light behind his closed eyelids and sought to figure out where they came from. There were bursts of light on the border between sleep and reality, but no fireworks could be heard. So this is not a holiday. The mind determined that if there is no need to have fun, you can remain sleeping. Mike turned over to his side, making the cushion more comfy, and the flash became brighter and stronger. Outside the window, the eyes began to slowly awaken, impenetrable. It continued to rain at night, and only pitch-black darkness could be seen through the blinds on the windows. Is it envisioning it for me? Mike puzzled, but his worries were quickly alleviated when he heard the piercing wail of a siren. This is clearly not a hallucination. He sat up abruptly in bed. A long, piercing sound jolted his nerves. "This is an alarm siren, dear. What's the noise?" Jessica asked in a dreamy tone, raising her head from the pillow. "Something is occurring outdoors, and it is absolutely nasty." Mike answered by getting out of bed. He came to the window and opened the blinds with 2 fingers. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Street lamps drove away. The dark of the night. Cars were parked along the road, and light periodically shone through the windows of nearby homes. But he noticed the dogs first, the barking of a German dog owned by the neighbors across the street. Then there were 2 poodles owned by an old woman 2 doors down. Soon, all the dogs within a few blocks began howling in unison, as if they realized something horrible was approaching. More windows in the surrounding houses started to light up. People came out onto the porch looking to the west, where the flashes appeared to be coming from. Suddenly, the sky was illuminated by several intense white and yellow bands like lightning, but instead of thunder, there was a deep rumble like that of a train. More and more neighbors began to assemble in their neighborhoods to witness this bizarre phenomena. "My God!" Jessica exclaimed, her voice shaking from dread. Mike turned to face her, recognizing her anxiety. The faint light cast menacing shadows over her phone screen. "What? What happened?" he asked, then hurriedly returned to his bed. Jessica stared at him with wide eyes. "The end of the world," she remarked, handing him a cell phone. Mike, who was not a fan of technology, quickly changed his mind when he saw a giant headline on the screen. North Korea has declared war. What followed was a text that chilled his blood. According to the article, the secluded Asian country, which has long threatened the globe with nuclear weapons, has finally decided to take action. North Korea referred to America and its allies as oppressors and launched missiles at a variety of targets. "I can't believe that," Mike mumbled, clutching the phone with shaky palms. "These rumors have been floating my entire life, but for them to finally decide this is insane. They just signed their own death warrant. What shall we do now?" Jessica's voice sounded desperate, and her hands immediately covered her ears to block out the siren's constant howl. Mike hurriedly tried to recall what they had learned in school in case World War III broke out. If you catch fire, halt, fall, and roll. If there is a tornado, hide beneath a heavy item and sit with your head on your knees. But what happens if a nuclear bomb lands on your head? However, he did not find an answer. His first impulse was to phone his parents and ask them what to do. But then he remembered that they did not have mobile phones. They could be located anywhere throughout northern Minnesota. Damn! What is wrong with them? Do they understand what's going on? Mike was overcome with panic on all fronts. Powerlessness in the face of the threat to his parents' lives, and his own started to drive him insane. My parents. I need to call my parents. Jessica exclaimed, attempting to get her cell phone from his grasp. There's no time for that now. Mike's self-preservation instinct kicked in. We need to get into the basement and barricade the door. His tone left no space for disagreement. Whatever occurred, they both had to go down, even if it meant death. Mike grabbed Jessica's hand and dashed towards the door, tripping over numerous items in the darkness. Out of habit, the former defender grabbed for his wallet on the desk. His fingers searched around without success, only finding one dime, which he pocketed before recognizing the futility of his activities. He decided there was no time to deal with nonsense, so he left everything else. The glass in the window shattered inward, scattering a million shards over the bedroom. Mike and Jessica entered the second-floor hallway. The siren howled more louder and more intensely. Both discovered powers within themselves that they had not previously suspected. As if the devil was pursuing them, if they had stopped or slowed down, he would have caught up with them. Nobody took risks. They moved down the railing like long, slippery lightning. The home trembled as if struck by a blast wave, and then the entire structure groaned, as if alive. Jessica cringed. Mike pictured the entire structure collapsing, burying them behind a heap of wreckage. He wasn't sure if the basement would protect them from the calamity outside, but it was definitely safer than being out in the open. The windows continued to explode, sending glass shards perilously near to their faces. It felt like an eternity before they made it to the kitchen. The pots and pans hanging over the center island began to slide off their hooks and clang to the wooden floor. The glassware and china in the cupboards rattled and spilled, resulting in useless rubbish. One of the ceiling beams suddenly shattered and dropped, obstructing their passage to the basement. Mike attempted to move it, but to no avail. "We'll die!" Jessica shouted. "No, we will not die. I will not let that happen, not after we've been through everything." Mike became even more decisive. He lowered his shoulder and attempted to move the beam with brute power. However, pushing proved to be as fruitless as attempting to pull. All attempts were in vain. It was vital to consider not just how to do it, but how to do it better. Looking around the chaos, Mike discovered just a hammer among other equipment in a collapsed drawer near the dishwasher. Well, there is nothing to lose. Mike picked up the hammer, gripped the handle, and felt a sense of peace in its weight. He examined the beam and discovered a weak point, a crack located approximately halfway between where it struck the door frame and the floor. Without thinking, he swung his hammer and pounded the crack. The chips spread to the sides after the strike, and the second blow made considerably more progress. He proceeded to hammer as if possessed, like a lumberjack on steroids. The beam gradually began to give way, and Mike shattered it into bits. "Faster! Down!" he yelled, dropping the hammer and grasping Jessica's hand. They proceeded to down the stairs in 2 leaps. The final steps to escape seemed to take forever, but as soon as they reached the basement, Mike shut the door behind them with a boom. "What happens now?" the girl asked him, almost whispering in the darkness. Mike felt for the switch, but the light did not turn on. He cursed. "Damn, there is no electricity. We need to find candles. Where are they?" Jessica's voice boomed out from the closet in the far corner. More accurately, they might be there, but Mike wasn't certain. But now he had to be Jessica's support. Feeling her hand, the former defender closed his eyes and tried to remember the layout of the basement. They moved ahead, inch by inch. The boom, like the rumble of a freight train, jolted them to their core. Outside there were shouts, murmurs of anguish, and begs for help, the soundtrack to the end of the world. Mike almost tripped over the side of the couch. Then he gently pushed it with the toe of his boot to ensure they were moving in the right way. Perhaps miraculously, the basement was briefly illuminated. The light flickered briefly before disappearing completely. Mike remembered what he had seen and took a rapid stride towards the far wall. Even here, above the foundation, the walls continued to quake. They could hardly stand on their feet. Plaster crumbled from the ceiling, showering their heads with jagged white fragments like rain. "We will not survive," Jessica shouted, nearly hysterical. She was nearly screaming, and Mike couldn't blame her. Their hideaway no longer appeared safe. "Get to the pantry. There is a big metal work table. If we crawl beneath it, we will have a chance," he shouted. At first, it appeared like they would not make it. Jessica began crying with every step, remembering her parents, whom she may never see again, and declaring that it was physically difficult to move on. But Mike refused to give up. He grabbed her wrist and nearly dragged her to the closet door. Opening it, he accidentally touched something cold and hard with his elbow near the entrance. Flashlight. Great. He instantly turned it on, illuminating their modest refuge, which resembled a vast storage closet. Jessica did not wait for an invitation before diving into the dark gray, hefty metal workbench. Mike glanced back at the disintegrating concrete before following her. They crawled under the table, their tangled limbs resembling a crazy Jenga tower. "If this is the end, please hug me," she said. Mike squeezed it, closed his eyes, and began to pray. "Our Father in heaven, may your name be hallowed." Above their heads, earth-shattering blasts rang out. A rumble thundered beneath their feet, splintering the cement blocks that formed their refuge. "Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done." Jessica's voice has now joined his. They felt the upper stories of the house start to crumble. The end of the world has arrived, and forgive us our debts as we forgive others. There was a sulfur odor in the air, the odor of death, as if Armageddon were peeping in, as if Satan himself were knocking on the back door of hell. "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." The world as they knew it came to an abrupt halt. Mike was a devotee of 1960s culture, therefore he knew all of the songs from that era. Psychedelic rock, hippie folk, and British invasion were all enjoyable, but Elvis Presley was his favorite. As a child, he frequently listened to his mother play recordings featuring the classics of the King of Rock and Roll, one of the tunes. At that point, he vividly heard the words, "Now or never." "It's now or never. Come hold me tight." He instantly felt as if he was in his mother's living room, watching her dance to this song, awkwardly but with abandon. She always lived in the present moment as if it could be her last. Mike could almost hear her singing alongside him. Everything was as apparent as if she was in the next room. But then he heard an incorrect tone. It was clearly not his mother. He opened his eyes. "The world around me has altered." This was obviously not his home. Yes, everything reminded him of his father's workshop, but the walls were now painted a pale mint green rather than dark blue. Under the metal pole hung old-fashioned skirts and dresses that appeared to be from a grandmother's wardrobe. In the corner was a wooden trunk adorned with 50s-style motifs. Mike was certain it was a dream, but everything appeared so real. He knocked hard on the wall. It appeared to him that this was a dream within a dream. But everything appeared too natural, as if to reinforce his ideas. He overheard another music at the hop, Danny and the Juniors. Mike recognized her and started to sing. "Well, you can do it. You can roll it." "What type of music is this?" Jessica's voice came from nearby as she awoke. "What's happening? Where are we now, Mike?" "It depends," he said with a half-smile. "Am I in your dream, or are you in mine?" Jessica looked scared. "What type of music is this?" My grandparents seemed to be listening to her. The music became louder, as if it were very close. Mike listened. The chorus has begun to sound. "Let's head to the jump." "Let's heading to the hop, honey." He unintentionally began to bob his head to the beat of the music. "What's wrong with that?" "In my opinion, this is a golden classic," he stated. Jessica quipped, "More like a moldy classic." "Hey, I will take it personally." Mike smiled. "Listen, do you even know what time it is? I feel as if I've been sleeping forever." She yawned and stretched. Mike instinctively reached into his pocket for his grandfather's gold pocket chronometer, but instead found only dust and a coin when he took it out. He recognized it as a $50 with the likeness of Kennedy. But the year on the coin caused him to freeze. "What the hell?" he whispered, feeling his hand begin to tremble. The year 2020 was written on the coin. A wave of memories swept over him. Mike remembers the North Korean nuclear attack and everything that happened just a few minutes ago. If this was indeed their reality, where are they now? What type of place is this? Perhaps this is purgatory, or maybe heaven. If so, then God would have many explanations. What happened? "Mike?" Jessica inquired worriedly. "I'm not sure yet," he said, closing his eyes to collect his thoughts. "First, we need to figure out how we got here in the first place. This place looks like my father's workshop, but it's completely different." Jessica began to look around and eventually noticed the situation. "What are these old-fashioned dresses? Someone certainly went beyond with the flea market." Mike responded to the inquiry with a question. "You remember the nuclear strike, right? Or am I going crazy, remember? How could I forget this?" She looked at him like he was crazy. It was just a few minutes ago. So, if it was just a few minutes ago, how did we get here? Jessica frowned. "A good question. We are in general here. I am attempting to figure things out," Mike stated. "What was the last thing you remembered before waking up here?" She contemplated as she ran her fingers through her reddish hair. "Plaster fell from the ceiling onto us. We barely made it into the storage room and crawled under the workbench. We then prayed together." The music abruptly stopped. They fell silent, listening to the sounds. Mike stopped his breath, pressed a finger to his lips, and begged Jessica to remain silent. Their hearts hammered hard as the seconds passed. After what seemed like an eternity, the silence was shattered by a new music, a smooth tune. "All I Have to Do Is Dream" by the Everly Brothers, Mike murmured. Someone's obviously playing music. "Well, thank you, Captain Obvious," Jessica joked. "But who is this, and how did we wind up at their house?" "I don't know," Mike said, scratching the back of his skull. "Perhaps we were discovered and saved during the onslaught and then transported here to rest because the hospitals had been damaged. If this were the case, why were we placed in this confined closet instead of on the bed? And there's barely a scratch on us either. There is certainly something strange here." Mike stared at the door from under which there was a small strip of light. "Whatever it is, we'll most likely find out about it there," he explained. "Are you crazy?" Jessica grabbed him by the shoulder and nearly hissed. "You don't know what awaits us outside the door. What if this is someone's home and we are arrested for trespassing? That's a risk I am willing to accept. We can't stay here forever with these words." Mike rose up on slightly shaking legs and proceeded to the door. Now the Everly Brothers were singing about their dream, and Conway Twitty began playing "It's Only Make-Believe." Is there actually something going on with this music? Mike thought, shaking his head as he placed his hand on the doorknob. He took a risk by opening the door. It creaked quietly, but that was it. Nobody yelled from the other side, so Mike dared to open it wider, allowing more light into the chamber. Conway's singing became crystal clear, as if the source of the sound were extremely close. He gently stepped out into the little corridor, walking on tiptoe to avoid making too much noise. The music came from around the corner. He noticed an odd picture. Everything looked like he was in another era. The bedroom was outfitted with antique furniture. The floor was covered in a clean beige carpeting, and flowery wallpaper from the 1950s hung on the walls of a four-poster bed with carved wooden headboard. There was a record player with a record spinning, but no one was nearby. "So, what do you see?" Jessica whispered. He tilted his head slightly to see her over his right shoulder. "Seeing is believing." The former defender extended his hand around the corner of the room. The redhead's jaw nearly dropped to the floor, and her palm immediately covered her mouth. "We're definitely not in Kansas anymore," she mumbled. "You can say it again." What did we actually discover? An antique furniture set from the house and yard. All of these items appear to have come from a garage sale. I know, I still don't understand anything. I need to investigate further to find it out. Mike bravely but cautiously emerged from his hiding place and moved farther into the room. It was about the same size as his Winterset basement. A curious coincidence, but aside from what he'd previously seen, the remainder of the room was quite Spartan. On the wall was an image of a samurai with curved swords and Japanese letters on top. Next to it was an oil painting depicting a mountain scene. The sound of clashing plates from above informed Mike that whoever had been in this bedroom was now in the kitchen, or possibly the dining room. He didn't want to fear the unknown, but there wasn't another option. Perhaps sitting on the couch would make him appear less frightening. Keep it in mind. He motioned Jessica to come out of hiding. She eventually obeyed, albeit with hesitation. They sat on a pea-green sofa with vertical wooden armrests and flat cushions that were really uncomfortable. The seconds passed painfully slowly. Mike was beginning to believe that no one would return, but just as Conway Twitty began to sing another song, the outer door creaked and a girl of 15 stood on the threshold. Her brunette hair was pulled back into a high ponytail secured with a crimson ribbon, and she was dressed in an ankle-length frock from her closet. In one hand, she clutched a modest white dish containing a sandwich. The girl saw Mike and Jessica at the same time. They observed her almost drop the platter to the floor. "What's happening here?" "Here. Who are you?" "Yes, you are. And how?" "How did you get into mine?" "My house?" The girl retreated to the door. Her face was full of dread, and her hand fumbled behind her back for the handle. The former defender quickly raised his hands, palms out, hoping that the gesture would be seen as innocuous. "Please, we will not harm you. Honestly, we have no idea how we got here, let alone why." "As for us, my name is Mike Montgomery, and here is my girlfriend, Jessica Wilder." Jessica smiled warmly, stood up, and moved a few steps forward, extending her hand to shake. "It's nice to meet you, young lady. What is your name?" Fortunately, the girl turned out to be perfectly behaved, which in itself was a wonder considering that Mike and Jessica could be murderers or robbers. "Antonia Villa on piano," she replied, raising a skeptical brow. "What do you mean when you say you're not sure how you got here? Are you potentially addicted?" "Addicted?" Mike hadn't heard that word in ages and spent a few seconds trying to figure out what it meant. Realizing this, he responded, "No. I've never been interested in this and never will be. I believe I can better answer your queries and reassure you if you tell me where we are." "Where are you?" "Don't you realize this is funny? You are in Winterset, Wisconsin. Although you are most certainly already aware of this Winterset, this indicated that they were still in the city." Mike took a short glance at Jessica before returning his attention to their hostess. "Let's be honest," he said. "You and the other survivors discovered us amid the remains of my house after the nuclear strike and brought us here so we could regain our senses. Right. Prevent a nuclear assault. What exactly are you talking about?" Now her smile has vanished. "Someone talked you into pulling this joke, didn't they?" "Well, the joke did not work. I recently ended my freshman year a few days ago, so I'm officially a sophomore." Antonia's mannerisms were peculiar, but Mike couldn't put his finger on it yet. "Actually, we just finished school," he explained, "and we aren't here for the humor. We simply need to work something out." "What exactly do you want to know?" The girl placed the plate and sandwich on the nearest chest of drawers and crossed her arms over her chest. "Well, you say we're in Winterset. Which address is this? There is something familiar here if you think about it." Mike gazed around the room. "Mister, I have no idea why this seems familiar to you. I've lived here my entire life." Mike kept insisting. "So, where are we?" "If you want the specific address, it's 905 Elmwood," she said, pursed lips. Now it was his turn to be startled. "What?" My address is 905 Elmwood. Perhaps you're making things up. If so, it isn't funny. I told you the truth, sir, Antonio said, taking offense. And now that I've done it, I encourage you both to depart my house in the same manner that you entered it, otherwise I'll call the police. She stamped her foot on the carpet and pointed firmly at the door. Mike opened his lips in protest, but Jessica placed her hand on his shoulder. Darling, forget about it. Let's simply leave. Did you take the coin that was in your pocket? And my phone? Did you bring it out of the closet? We could just use Google Maps to get our exact coordinates. He patted his pockets. No, they are empty, Mike stated. Perhaps the phone is still in the closet. Perhaps we could eat. His girlfriend advised they return the way they had come. Antonio now asked, "What is a telephone? What is Google Maps? Why had I never heard about this? Are you kidding me?" Mike could not help but laugh. This must be some sort of complicated production. It was my friends Adam Diggs and Matt Crockett. Who put you up to this, didn't they? If this is the case, they have done their best. This sofa, for example, appears to have come from an antique shop on Claremont Street. Antiques. Old stuff, Antonia cried indignantly. My parents bought it for me at the Mason Furniture Store on Grand and 2nd Street, not some trash shop on Claremont. Claremont is home only to the Buggy Wheel Cafe and Tim's Butcher Store. And, if I recall properly, a city service gas station. Mike froze in his tracks. If his buddies are playing a hoax on him, they have done an excellent job researching Winterset's past. Even after Richard Nixon resigned as a result of the Watergate incident and was succeeded by Gerald Ford, the stores identified by the girl no longer existed. He planned to test Antonia's knowledge of 1960s details to determine how prepared she was. Who is the current president of the United States? Mike asked. What's inscribed on my forehead that says stupid? My parents, who are Catholics, voted for John F. Kennedy, so I am aware of this fact. The girl responded easily. Who are the vice president and secretary? Antonia rolled her eyes and moaned angrily. Lyndon Johnson is vice president, while Kennedy's brother Robert serves as secretary. Everyone understands this. We go over this in civics lesson in school. She was correct again. Mike decided to go further. Who is the governor of Wisconsin? It's simple, she responded with a bullet in her voice. Gaylord Nelson and the Winterset mayor, Frank Witherspoon, who succeeded Bertram Wallace. Damn, this gal obviously knows her business. Crockett had not prepared her for his decision to attempt entertainment digs. What's your favorite television show? Antonia giggled like a schoolgirl. My 3 sons are on ABC, of course. All my girlfriends adore Don Grady, who portrays Robbie Douglas. He's simply wonderful. Mike began to sweat. All of this was beginning to make him nervous. Mike became obsessed with the thought of stumping her. Okay, this is a hot thing. This is a quiz for you. The 3rd of February, 1959 is often referred to as the day the music died. Can you please inform me who perished in a plane crash in a cornfield near Clear Lake, Iowa? Antonia interrupted him, feigning seriousness. Let me think. Isn't it Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, and their pilot, Roger Peterson? Is this so? Mr. She nodded triumphantly as she faced Mike, who was taken aback, and Tony. Fine. Don Pardo, tell the lady that she has won. Mike finally discovered his voice. I do not comprehend. How do you know all this? This query was intended to himself rather than to her. How do I know this? This is common knowledge. Anyone can read TV Guide or Tiger Beat and learn what they need to know. Mike swallowed a bowling ball-sized lump from his throat. Her understanding of 1960s pop culture began to worry him, and then it dawned on him. What day is today? He questioned, attempting to recapture his smile. I have not told you yet, but today is Monday. Her gorgeous brown eyes narrowed. Which month and year? You're nuts. Today is May 21st, 1962. Okay, final bonus round. If you respond, you are in the Queens. Which picture won the Oscar for Best Drama in March? Who starred in it, and what was its name? Antonia licked her lips and glanced at the ceiling, thinking. Mike felt like he was already on the verge of success. Diggs and Crockett could not have trained her that far. But after a few seconds, she responded, "You probably mean the film. American Dreams with Catherine Kennedy. What a movie. I've heard it will be converted into a television series this fall." Mike finally gave up on his legs, which felt like cotton, and dropped on the sofa, hands covering his face. Oh my God, this cannot be. What's he talking about? He heard Antonia's voice speaking to Jessica. His girlfriend appeared to shrug. To be honest, I believe he is a little upset. I agree. To clarify, are you really claiming it is? What day is Monday? May 21st, 1962. Yes. And it's 10:52 a.m. Mike looked up just in time to see the girl, then glanced at the alarm clock on the nightstand. It was an old-fashioned circular clock with two huge bells on top. Now that I've told you all you wanted to know, you probably already knew. Could you please be honest? You are harmless. How did you interpret this? Jessica inquired whether you were going to hurt me. You would have already finished it. So, what is your story? How did you enter the house without my noticing? You? Are you hiding from the law? Her eyes and face brightened up with hope. That would be cool in an unusual manner. Nothing ever happens in Winterset like in 2020. So in 1962, Mike believed that everything was a little more spectacular than you thought. Are you into science fiction, Antonia? Do you mean something like The Twilight Zone with Rod Serling? Of course. I occasionally watch when my parents allow it. She sat on the edge of the bed, sandwich in hand, and took a large bite. Are you a time traveler or something? Mike nodded slowly and sincerely. Yes, as weird as this may sound. That is exactly what I am saying. She nearly choked with laughter. Prove it. Take out your blaster and make that hideous Japanese decor disappear. Antonia pointed to the warriors holding swords. Oh, my mother. It tastes absolutely terrible. Unfortunately, we don't have anything this futuristic. But will this suffice? Mike brought out a $50 from his pocket, which included an image of Kennedy. The penny sparkled in the light of the lamp. What's so special about it? She asked in disbelief, but then looked closer. Is that the president? On a 50-cent piece? It's a forgery of actual coins, Benjamin Franklin. Look at the date and let me know what you notice. He raised the coin higher. Antonia gave a gasp. It says 2020. How is that possible? Mike's voice became calm as the shock of the scenario subsided. We've already talked. Jessica and I are unwitting time travelers from the year 2020. Is your mind able to embrace such a concept? The girl questioned him. She also sounded calmer, as if she had accepted what was happening. Antonia sat with half a sandwich in one hand and her other fist pressed against her cheek. I must admit, you really puzzled me. If it had been another girl, you would have driven straight to the psychiatric unit in a police car. But your coin and outfit are too convincing. No one I know wears skirts this long. Or graphic T-shirts. She pointed at Jessica's hem, which was a few inches over her knees, and Mike's Mountain Dew T-shirt. Let's just say I've read enough Animals from Outer Space comics to believe that anything is conceivable. Great. Mike sighed with relief as he realized he had surmounted another difficulty. So, how did you make it back? Antonia began counting with her fingers. 58 years ago. Wow. Mike believed that awe was probably the most appropriate expression in the Villa Piano family. He responded that everything had happened just as we had said. Jessica and I were sleeping upstairs on the bed. Did you sleep on the same bed? Are you married? No, it is impossible. Your last names differ. Jessica opened her lips to object, but Mike spoke first. He understood what was and wasn't acceptable in 1962. Unmarried couples living together may produce a significant controversy in a society where even married couples on TV sleep in different beds. Where we are from, everything is a lot more liberal, even couples. He stopped himself from saying gay because he knew it meant something completely different at the time. Furthermore, the concept of same-sex relationships would be strange to a sheltered girl like Antonia, whether married or single. Nobody cares whether they live together or separately. People can do what they wish. Wow. Antonia gazed dreamily into the distance. Can you imagine what it's like to be so free? I'd like to return to your time and live there. You can go there the usual route, but you will be over 70, Jessica replied with a smile. Damn it. Antonia stamped her foot on the carpet. Mike noticed another genuine curse. You do not want to be where we were. You do not want to see what we saw, he said truly. From here, the future may appear wonderful, but believe me when I say that you would be better off remaining a happy and carefree girl in your early 60s. How do you say that? There must have been many fantastic inventions during your time. Are you flying vehicles across the sky? Or are there tablets that replace all food during the day? I read about this in Scientific American. Her eyes shined even more brightly. Mike moaned. He should have seen this coming from a mile away. No, we don't have that in 2020, he stated. Her dejected expression, with her lower lip slightly projecting, appeared almost funny. However, we now have computers the size of a fingernail that can almost completely replace humans. We have autos that are so technologically advanced that they resemble spaceships. We have something called the Internet, which allows you to search, watch, and study anything. However, several issues arose as a result of these technological miracles. Our government is extremely crooked. Ordinary individuals would prefer to sue you than say hi. Political correctness has taken over society to the point where everyone walks around like they have something in their back pocket. Political correctness, Antonia inquired, scratching her dark hair. Damn, the genie is out of the bottle and there is no way to get him back. It's a ridiculous term to characterize those who believe they know what's best for everyone, Mike explained. Oh, we call these individuals parents. She responded without hesitation, smiling like the Cheshire Cat. Jessica burst out laughing at the joke, relieving Mike of any leftover stress. He laughed with the two girls before saying something that neither he nor his partner could dispute. Okay, honey, it is time to confront the truth. I don't believe we can go back the way we came unless another nuclear war is on the horizon. The former quarterback was aware that the Cuban Missile Crisis would push the United States and the Soviet Union to the edge of a catastrophic winter in October. But Antonia didn't need to know that yet. Furthermore, their very existence has the potential to transform into a butterfly flapping its wings. Perhaps Nikita Khrushchev will try to deploy missiles on the renegade island sooner. Maybe the Russian bear will hibernate again during the Siberian winter. So we are stuck here. Antonia became visibly distressed at the prospect of this circumstance. At the present, this is the case. We may either gripe and grumble about our unique situation, or we can make the most of it. I say we take the bull by the horns. Mike spoke with unexpected zeal. He was already planning how to take advantage of his understanding of 1960s history and society. Jessica walked up and down the room, sighing methodically, before sitting down on the sofa, plainly sad. I guess you're correct. To be honest, I'd rather you were wrong, she said. Examine it from the other side. Even if we could return, we would only find nuclear ash. Here we have the opportunity to start a new life and possibly make the world a better place. Mike answered. Antonia opened her mouth to say something, but decided against it. Mike could see the questions burning in her eyes. She was eager to understand about future events and their impact on the course of history. But what's the point here? If every succeeding moment changes everything like balls on a billiard table, it's best to just stay mute and carry on with your life, he reasoned. I have a temporary solution for you, the girl finally said. Father and mother have a room upstairs that they rent out to earn some money. They are now on a religious retreat, but they told I could pass if those interested looked well enough. Is it decent enough? I believe we meet that description, Jessica answered nonchalantly. Let me guess. This is the chamber at the end of the hallway, Mike asked. Antonia nodded. He snorted. Okay, this is too much. I fly back in time by half a century and find myself in the same location where I lived in 2020. Piano's daughter, Villa, commented, Life is full of coincidences. Wait a minute. The invitation to remain is, of course, welcoming. But how do we pay for it? We don't have any money except for my 50-cent piece, which isn't enough to cover our rent, clothes, and food. Antonia came to the rescue yet again. If you need money, come work with me at our pizza tonight. She's around 7 or 8 blocks away, along the highway in the summer. Parents hire someone for cash, so they do not have to deal with paperwork. Mike and Jessica would be absolute fools to turn down such an opportunity. But since seeing is believing, he requested a brief tour of the residence. Antonia eagerly consented, taking her new acquaintances outside their comfort zone and into the unknown. Mike's first view around the kitchen came from the top of the basement steps. She appeared both familiar and exotic to him. The room's proportions were same, but everything else was radically different. Instead of the modern dark cherry cabinets and rose quartz that Charles and Caroline Montgomery preferred, there were white enamel worktops and matching white cabinets next to a pale yellow General Electric range. The pale blue Kelvinator refrigerator with wide chrome handles buzzed noisily. A little table with metal rims and chrome legs replaced the huge island table that had previously existed. In the corners, there were clean chairs with comfortable cushions that complemented the stove. The living room suddenly got more fascinating. If in the 21st century, comfort was a significant component of existence, then in 1962, conservative households valued practicality more. The Villa Piano family had nothing extra. The sofa and chair, with their flat brown cushions and wooden bases, seemed a little more comfortable than a hedgehog. Burnt orange curtains blew in the May breeze over a large RCA Victor television console cabinet with wooden shelves. Jessica glanced at this big equipment on the second story, clearly terrified, and wanted to visit his new old room right away. Mike was the first to ascend the stairs, which proved to be narrower and steeper than he remembered. We have reached the end of the corridor. He turned the enormous brass handle which had never been there before, or was it? Come to think of it, I opened the door to a clean, well-kept room with a faint fragrance of furniture varnish. There were unusual circular decorative pillows made of golden satin on the bed, and a bedspread in the same color was carefully tucked under the mattress. In the corner beside the window was a desk identical to Mike's in the future, but constructed of sturdier wood. Is this wardrobe and chest of drawers for both of us? Jessica inquired, her gaze drawn to the elaborately carved top of the chest of drawers. It's okay. We can buy another one as soon as we make enough money and save enough. We'll also need to think about buying clothes. Mike explained that what we have now will not last long. Antonia offered to lend Jessica a couple of her gowns. Mike will probably wear my father's shirts and ties. He believes that assisting others is a Christian obligation. Jessica spoke of Christian obligation. Your parents are unlikely to be thrilled that a young unmarried couple lives in their home. How can we get around this? Mike shrugged. Let's assume we're married. We have no choice. I'll find you an engagement ring to make it appear authentic. Would you want to visit our pizzeria right now? Asked Antonia. Mike put his fingers over his hair, which still contained building dust from the 2020 kitchen ceiling. A shower seemed like a great idea. My body was already beginning to remind me of the time change. He yawned. Can I sleep before work? This time travel sapped all of my strength, he admitted. Stretching, of course. Not an issue. I normally open the restaurant by 6 p.m., giving you plenty of time to rest. In the meantime, Antonio offered to pick out some clothes for you. Thank you again for your understanding and belief in us. Mike remarked, I don't think I would do the same thing if I were you. She nodded. No, we would. You're both nice folks. I'm just feeling it now. Rest. See you in a few hours. Mike grinned, shut the door behind her, and shook his head. Her open trust and curiosity, her eagerness to assist complete strangers. All of this was typical of their time period. Antonia Avila Piano was a firm believer in all senses, true to her word. Antonia left them clothes, including a white shirt, tank top, dark blue tie, and trousers for Mike. Jessica wears a spring yellow dress that covers everything from the neck to the knees, save the arms. Mike felt the garment a little tight for the damp weather, but he put it on without complaint. Jessica, deciding that it was a reasonable answer for temporary camouflage, did not hide her unhappiness, referring to her dress as old ladies' clothes. After some wrangling and preparation, they finally got ready and went downstairs for their first day of work in 1962, just as Mike and Jessica arrived. Antonia was already waiting for them in front of the television. Black and white visuals of a religious show appeared on the television. The televangelist shook his Bible violently as he shouted into the camera that his audience needs to repent of their sins to avert a fate in Satan's fire and brimstone. His strong Southern accent sounded just as horrible to them as it had in 2020. Antonia noticed them and rose up, turning the knob to turn off the television. The screen became dark. "Much better," she replied, taking in their new looks. "You don't stand out as much anymore. I hope I was as lucky." Jessica mumbled beneath her breath, but Antonia did not hear it. Mike softly nudged her with his elbow, encouraging her to keep silent. "So, ladies, isn't it time to go?" Mike spoke up, recalling that bravery was highly valued during this time period. He opened and held the front door, allowing his companions to pass inside. As they walked out into the sidewalk, Mike and Jessica saw 1962 for the first time. Mike saw a Norman Rockwell-esque depiction of America. Of course, he understood that no society is flawless. Every time has some shortcomings, but here, everything looked different. In the courtyards of residences, fathers in straw summer hats rolled up their shirt sleeves and observed family cars, generally Fords with fenders or Chevrolets with tail fins shining with chrome alongside their teenage sons. Women in modest gowns hung laundry on lines, while youngsters in jeans and plaid shirts roamed around barefoot, screaming loudly. Jessica commented on the noise, but Mike simply smiled and shrugged. For him, it was the sound of freedom, innocence, and a time when children could be themselves. There were smaller elm trees on both sides of the street that would have grown taller by 2020. Milkmen, newsboys, and doctors on house calls were all present, alive and real. Mike couldn't resist taking in the mood of a new era for him. The Pizza Palace Village Piano Pizzeria was located on the southern fringes of the city center, behind a single stop sign that was replaced with a traffic light in 2020. And, next to two-lane Road 64, a future four-lane roadway. There was a true tasty freeze nearby, a modest cafe with front-facing windows and plenty of outside seating. She was already full of life. Teenagers, boys in skinny jeans and basic t-shirts, ladies in colorful dresses similar to what Jessica wore, rushed back and forth between custom vehicles, convertibles, motorcycles, and traditional parent automobiles. The aroma of burgers and fries filled the air, and Elvis Presley songs blared from every radio. Good luck charm. The servers did their best to accept orders and deliver meals while avoiding getting trampled by the mob. "In the summer, this place is always crowded," Antonia stated, nodding toward their neighbor. "Village Piano loses some customers during the warmer months. However, our company's general stability has improved. Wintertown, as far as I recall, has always been a resort town." Between Memorial Day and Labor Day, campers flock to the area's 2 or 3 campgrounds. They frequently float down the Apple River in inflatables and drink cheap beer to pass the time. Mike said, suddenly feeling overdressed amid the other youngsters his age who were having fun. Certain things never seem to change. Antonia extended her thumb over her shoulder toward the center of the Winter Palace. Mike didn't know the names of the pharmacy cafes and butcher stores that dominated the 3 blocks. We even had real biker gangs pass through town on their way to Minnesota. On Fridays and Saturdays, they basically take over all the pubs, motorcycle gangs. This was new to Mike. Judging by the scene outside the tasty Frozen, folks seemed to be having more fun in 1962 than they are in politically acceptable 2020. He expressed this opinion and then emphasized that people nowadays ponder too much rather than simply enjoying life. I wonder when humans become so thoughtful. Their location, abandoned and quiet, contrasted sharply with the packed diner next door. Villa Piano appeared to be a more elegant restaurant, judging by the colorful plants and red brick around the door. When Antonia opened the glass doors and turned on the lights, the chamber evoked memories of old Italy. Small circular tables with red and white tablecloths were placed on old tiles in the same colors. The perimeter was ringed with booths with red vinyl upholstery and tall wooden barriers, and beyond them was another area with a mahogany bar, dark lighting, and a strong odor of yeast and tobacco smoke. All of this reminded Mike of a location where mafiosi might gather, and he expressed this assumption aloud. Antonia looked around to be sure no one could hear them, then dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. If these old bricks could communicate, they would do so through listening. She tapped the vine and trellis-covered wall. So, where should we start? Mike rolled up his sleeves, anxious to go to work immediately. Idleness has fled. He had too much time to contemplate and wanted to act. If 1962 was their new reality. Antonia motioned to the kitchen on the opposite side of the diner. This way, monsieur. She grinned and tossed them aprons featuring the gold Villa Piano logo. Great. Let the fun begin, Jessica muttered quietly, sighing deeply and rolling her eyes. Mike issued his girlfriend a warning. Look, this wasn't the first time they'd been there, and it wouldn't be the last either. There was less work at Villa Piano in the summer, Antonia explained, but Mike and Jessica wouldn't have noticed that on their first night at work. Work in 2020 was drastically changed, with numerous tools and systems making life easier. This freed up more time and, in theory, provided more options for entertainment. Everything was different in 1962, and when they said that they make money via blood, sweat, and tears, they meant it. Perhaps this is why individuals in the past knew how to enjoy their vacations. Mike felt that they didn't have much free time that evening. He noticed that practically everything was done by hand. It's not that folks in the early 1960s were anti-technology. How could they? Many of the things Mike and Jessica took for granted did not exist at the time, such as cleaning dishes or preparing pizza dough, yet everyone worked hard and without complaining. There was no safety net explanation or empathy for individuals who claimed to be disadvantaged. People either pulled themselves up with their own hair or had others assist them simply because it was the appropriate thing to do. The sense of camaraderie, teamwork. Mike instantly settled into the flow. Jessica, on the other hand, utilized it as a platform for sarcasm. Every time she saw him, whether at the sink, scraping cheese off a metal plate, or behind the cash register, she grumbled about being homesick or having worn her hands to the bone. He tried to be understanding. Just 24 hours before, they were living the high life, but her negativity wore him down over time. Jessica warned him during a break behind the building that the air was awful. Hot air and a cacophony of kitchen sounds streamed out the back door. So they took a seat on the brick wall in a quiet nook. Dusk was quickly falling over the area. There was a fresh, delicious breeze coming from the south side of Highway 64, and passing cars' headlights periodically lighted the road. In 1962, especially in tiny towns in the upper Midwest, people lived by the sun, rising at dawn and retiring at twilight. What happened? Is a little tobacco smoke bothering you too much? Mike inquired. wiping his hands on the edge of his apron, which had somehow stayed unstained with tomato sauce or olive oil. Jessica appeared irritated by his casual attitude, as if he had to side with her against the clients. "There is more than a little here. Almost everybody smokes. Don't they understand that all of this contributes to lung cancer, heart disease, and emphysema? People here are either unaware or unconcerned. Why are you so concerned? The tip isn't horrible, is it?" She patted a little lump in her apron pocket, which clinked. "If you think nickels, dimes, and occasionally dollar bills are good, then." "Yes," Jessica answered. Her red-haired head nodded toward the visible portion of the tasty freeze, where 3 or 4 fireflies flickered in the darkness, their silhouettes raising their hands in greeting. Mike returned the favor. "Perhaps I should go to work there. Making shakes and ice cream is definitely far easier than making pizza from scratch. They might also have air conditioning." "Perhaps. But you're overlooking one key point, Jess. We don't have legitimate driver's licenses or IDs. It will take time for you to find work anywhere else than here." "So, what's the plan?" she asked. "We both plan to attend the University of Minnesota this September. Is it still possible?" "Yes. The college and its campus are here, if that is what you mean." In reality, the Golden Gophers football team was a national championship contender throughout this period. The Vikings are still a young team, with Fran Tarkenton at quarterback and Norm Van Brocklin as coach. Oh, how I would want to play for Bud Grant. Mike considered the possibility with excitement. "Anything beats laboring for pennies at Villa Piano," Jessica responded, matching his enthusiasm. And then reality struck him down. High school diplomas, letters of recommendation, fees, and grants, all of that just evaporated like smoke. "We can't just go onto campus and start studying because no one here knows us, save for one lady who recently ended her freshman year and is ready to become a sophomore. Even then, I am not sure she believes us. And yet, where else can we make money than here? Don't you understand? We need a piano. We need a long-term plan because I don't want to spend the rest of my life scrubbing tables and working with oil and grease." Jessica remarked this while crossing her arms over her soiled apron. At the time, his partner smelled strongly of sweat and balsamic vinegar. And suddenly it occurred to him. Whether by coincidence or not, I was reminded of Catherine Kennedy's lovely platinum curls. When you consider the future, there's always California. Think about the ocean, sand, and surf, as well as pleasure and sunshine all year. The world may be our oyster, Mike said, purposely avoiding discussing his true motivation and the potential hot topic. It works. Mike knew Jessica's flaws. One among them is a fondness for beaches. Visiting the Pacific or Atlantic Ocean had been on her bucket list since they first started dating. "Now you're talking business with gas," she used the slang of the day. His partner smiled for the first time that evening, and they even shared a quick kiss, so Mike knew she liked his concept. Then Antonia, white as chalk, came at the back door. "Mike, could you please gather the filthy dishes in the rear bar? Jessica, I need your help preparing the spices and sauces for tomorrow's meal," she said. "Oh, joy. Return to work." His girlfriend grumbled as she walked back inside. Mike walked out of the kitchen, through the sliding door, and into the dining room, where older patrons were slowly leaving to end their evening. He saw that no one was dressed casually. The men were dressed in suits and ties, and on their way out, they put on fedora hats with high brims. The women wore modest evening dresses, pearls, and high-styled hair, while a blue veil of tobacco smoke lingered stubbornly in the air. He coughed to demonstrate as he passed through this curtain. A dozen patrons remained in the tavern, sipping late-night beverages and conversing with the bartender, Maurice. He was a man in his 60s with broad shoulders, a gray bicycle, a handlebar mustache, and the appearance of an old boxer. Here, unlike in the dining room, instead of the smell of cigarettes, the air was filled with the rich aroma of Cherry Prince Albert pipe tobacco. In one area, there was an authentic Wurlitzer jukebox. However, instead of popular youth hits, it played country songs by Hank Williams and Furlan, the Husky. Mike took a tray from the polished wood and began collecting glasses and glasses from tables throughout the room. In dramatic contrast to the older guys, the young woman sat to the side with an averted gaze, sadly sipping her cocktail. Her eyes were green, gray, and filled with sadness. Mike noticed that she clearly needed to talk, not wanting to appear intrusive. He pretended to be occupied as he gently went towards her, continuing to collect glassware. 3 empty cocktail glasses stood to the side, providing him the perfect reason to approach her table. "Excuse me, miss. May I remove this and make room?" Mike asked, coming closer. She shrugged, as if she didn't care. She said, "Do what you need to do." Mike put the glasses away and then placed the tray next to him. "Sorry for bothering you, but you seem distressed. Maybe I can help with something. I'm not as charming as Maurice at the bar, but they claim I'm an excellent listener. Would you like to talk?" The girl's brown curls spilled over her hands, which she used to lean on the table while strands of hair fell over her face. She gazed at him intently. "You are too young to work at a tavern. What do you know about my problems? You resemble a typical suburban Midwestern youngster, and not poor either. You'd be hard-pressed to understand where I was and what I went through. You don't look any older than me, perhaps a year or two younger." Mike said, "Try it," with confidence. He got a chair, turned it over, and sat down, his elbows resting on the back. I don't even know your name?" She spoke quietly. "Michael Montgomery is the pride of the class." The former quarterback paused, realizing that he had nearly revealed his roots in the distant future of 2020. 1962. He promptly corrected. Only a few people now knew the reality. "I thought so, Michael Montgomery. You're only a puppy. But you're correct. You're 1 year older." She extended her hand. "Laura Watson, by the way." Mike shook her hand, observing that her skin was rough, as if she had worked with her hands frequently. "Nice to meet you, Laura. Can I bring you a second drink or replenish yours? It appears that it has already ended." "I don't have any money, but Maurice lets me sit here because of my beauty," she said with a slight smile. Mike grinned back and returned to the counter to order another drink. The bartender nodded, but served her a weak cocktail with a small amount of vodka, which Mike noted. Laura didn't seem to notice when he set the cocktail in front of her. He sat back down in his chair, eager to resume the chat. "So, why Villa Piano? And why Monday night? Isn't there a better place than this tavern with old men?" Indeed, some of the regulars behind the counter attempted to steal glances at Laura. "These boys," she laughed, "they do not disturb me. All men are like this. They will continue to watch unless I urge them to stop. The female simply needs to get used to this fact. Not every man is a sex addict." "If you may allow me to point out," Mike remarked, "there are people who know how to treat a woman with respect. Is it true? Tell me. Because there is absolutely nothing like that where I am from." Her deep sigh indicated that she had nearly given up on life. "So, Miss Watson, where are you from?" Mike inquired, leaning in so as not to miss a syllable from Las Vegas. "But please don't hold that against me," she said, frowning. Mike's brows knitted together slightly. "Why should I hold that against you? Vegas is known for its glitz and splendor. I'd want to travel there sometime. I expected you to say that. Most individuals believe so. They don't see what lurks beneath the sparkle and glamour that this metropolis exudes." Laura responded, "It's not called Sin City for nothing. This is something I know firsthand. I'm not sure what it was, and I don't want to dig into your life. But it appears like you've left everything behind. Otherwise, why are you in a small town like Chimney?" "Anonymity," she stated simply. "Also, this is a chance to start over. Why not? This city is a true wilderness. Who will be looking for me here? Mike blinked many times in surprise at her sharp tone. He had no objections to women using aggressive words, but it was uncommon in 1962. However, he chose not to dwell on this. It is none of my business, Laura. But are you running from the law? If so, your secret will remain with me. Secrets are trusted with those who do not expose them. Her demeanor shifted drastically in the blink of an eye. A calm interlocutor appeared to have provided a watershed moment. Laura transformed into a fearful and distant individual. The girl's face showed suspicion and her eyes narrowed. Oh, God. How did you find me? I was simply an innocent child wanting to make a better life for himself. Tears shone in her eyes and rolled down her well-defined cheekbones. What? What exactly are you talking about? Who discovered you? How did I find you when I wasn't even seeking for you? Mike instinctively patted her shoulder, calming her down. It occurred spontaneously before he understood what he was doing. Laura's cold determination seemed to melt away with the semi-intimate touch. Suddenly, she was practically glued to Mike, clinging to him like there was no tomorrow. I'm so sorry. I simply thought of you. She began to cry loudly and could not continue. Everyone who had previously watched them with lusty enthusiasm now saw her as a threat to their tranquility. Laura, maybe we can find a spot where we can discuss things calmly. You appear to need some privacy away from inquisitive eyes, Mike proposed. She dabbed her face with tissues from the dispenser on the table and attempted to calm down. I'm sleeping in a motel nearby. We could go there, she eventually said. The tilted corner of the brow nearly appeared flirty. Mike remarked, I believe you misinterpreted my intentions, Laura. I am not attempting to take advantage of the circumstance. I just want to be your friend. Her acquaintance appeared to be unfamiliar with this concept. I don't think I've ever had anything like this, she said, looking at him with utter vulnerability. So what is wrong with me? Do you think I'm not pretty enough? There is absolutely nothing wrong with you, and certainly you are really gorgeous. In fact, Mike thought the word beautiful was too modest for Laura. Now that the first dismal barrier of her mood had been removed, he began to recognize in her a genuine desert rose, dazzling in its beauty. Her green Irish eyes and high cheekbones, reminiscent of a Scandinavian princess, explained why she had everyone's attention in the bar. The short top, along with a red and white scarf, highlighted the gentle curve of her cleavage and toned, tanned tummy. In my experience, males who find women attractive usually find a way to take advantage of them. Please excuse my lack of social skills. She drummed her fingers against the table. Have you ever heard of a biker gang called the Hells Bells? Mike could claim to know a song by that name from the heavy band AC/DC, but Laura would think he was insane because the music was decades away. No, I can't say that, I heard, he responded honestly. But what possibly be so horrible about your relationship with them that you're frightened they'll follow you across the country? I didn't do anything specific but run away. However, there are no former members of the Bells of Hell. Their imprint remains with you forever. She lifted her light brown hair up, displaying a little yellow bell tattoo with the initials HB on the back of her head. What could be terrible about them? How about extortion and physical violence? Is that enough? Sorry, Mike said, surprised, unsure what else to say. For what? You did not threaten me, correct? After 2 years of this, I decided to take a chance and run away in quest of a better life. It was either the slow path to death in Las Vegas or the danger of being apprehended and shot in the forehead. One day. This method at least allowed me to go out on my own terms. Mike was stunned to his core. He was ashamed of idolizing 1962. Every era, no matter how comfortable it appeared, had flaws. How horrible, how much anguish. His hand went out, as if on its own, to take her palm. Why was he drawn to a man he hardly knew? Perhaps he had a special fondness for wounded birds. Can I inquire how everything happened? God, tell me you weren't born into this gang. Laura's bright eyes, like drills, pierced his soul. No. But the reality wasn't any better, and perhaps even worse. What could be worse than the torment you received from this gang? He asked, already on the verge of tears. Her tale was incredibly tragic. Laura shook her head and lowered her gaze. It is a long story. She paused, looking for words. Have you ever heard the saying, out of the frying pan and into the fire? So the bells of hell were the fire, and the Immaculate Heart Catholic Orphanage was the frying pan in which I started to fry. From a very early age, this site holds some of my earliest recollections. I never knew my parents. Her lush lower lip quivered. This story deviated further and more from a pleasant finish. Are you serious? Mike asked. Whatever happened to them? Who knows? The shelter never told me the specifics. Perhaps they know something. Perhaps they don't. Your guess is as valid as mine, Laura said. Anyway, the nuns in this hell were supposed to protect me. Did everything except that they told me I was a satanic child who needed to be constantly cleansed of sin. Otherwise, the demon would still inhabit my useless flesh. I remained there for so long because I didn't know any different. And if you live like that long enough, you begin to believe that this is what you deserve. Nobody deserves to be abused like this. Mike said something, but then realized he had used nasty words. Laura, on the other hand, did not respond at all to the vulgar word, as if it had only recently entered her consciousness. You're correct. No one. At some point, I recognized myself and knew that any place is preferable to there, so the boxes and trash cans in the alleys served as my temporary abode till the bells of hell rang. I wanted to fight. 2 weeks ago, I thought it was time to take a gamble. I grabbed some money from their coffers and bought the first Greyhound bus ticket I could find. I didn't care where he was going as long as he was away from those hellish memories. I don't blame you. I cannot image what you went through. Mike stated that the few minutes he and Jessica had spent avoiding a nuclear holocaust felt like a stroll in the park in comparison to her existence. I wouldn't wish my past onto a snake, Laura said, having finished her cocktail. I just wanted to put down roots in a city where no one knows my name and no one interferes in my business. You are, of course, an exception. Why me? Mike was puzzled. He watched as his new friend stood up from her chair, preparing to leave, and then followed her lead. You cared enough to listen to me. This means more to me than you can imagine. She took another careful look at him. You are an enigma, Michael Montgomery. You don't seem to belong here either, just like me. I can't figure out why, but that's probably why you intrigued me so much. I don't even know what to say. Mike didn't want to ruin their moment or vibe. Then don't say anything, Laura said boldly, stepping forward, taking his hands and kissing him. Electricity coursed down his spine. The blood pounded in his veins, stronger and hotter than he thought possible. What am I doing? I have a girlfriend flashed through his head, but they were like opposite poles of two magnets that could not be separated from each other. The words came out of his mouth before he could stop them. Will I see you again? He asked as she retreated towards the exit. She kept her gaze fixed on him. What is your phone number? He shrugged. I just moved and my phone won't be installed until next week, he said. Besides, he still hadn't asked Antonia for her phone number. Not an issue. Do you work here almost every evening? Laura's ear-to-ear smile lit up the dreary, dim tavern. Now, I work here every evening. Bills need to be paid, you know. Maybe I'll come back here sometime. Perhaps not. A girl should keep a man on his toes. Right? With these words and a flirtatious wink. His mysterious desert rose vanished, as if carried away by the wind. Mike finally understood why Antonia was so reserved when he met her parents. Angelo and Maria Villa Piano, a few days after returning from a religious retreat. They turned out to be the archetypal prim elderly couple that adopted a rigid theocratic parenting style. Spare the rod and spoil that child was certainly part of their vocabulary. Even though Mike never saw them touch their daughter, Antonia was punished for suppressing her will. She was rarely permitted to leave the house, except to study or work, and there was no question of spending time with friends or courting a lover. Despite the oppressive, nearly poisonous climate here, Antonia did her best not to grumble. She further endeared herself to Mike and Jessica when she convinced her parents to allow the married pair. It was an undeniable lie that Mike was more than willing to accept in order to stay at 905 Elmwood and his new old bedroom. Antonia claimed that their hard work at the pizza speaks for itself. After considerable persuading and a cheap gold-plated ring from a pawn shop in the nearby town of Richmond, Angelo agreed that the new couple of guests were good Christians and could stay. He paid them in cash and charged only a small fee for accommodation. It wasn't an awful deal except for Antonia's condition. Mike tried to consider the era and how parents might have acted back then, but that didn't stop him from advocating for Villa Piano's daughter. Why does religion always lead people into dark, gloomy jungles? He often pondered during his initial weeks of life in 1962. She not only stunted Antonia's growth and development, but also caused Laura terrible suffering. He continued to shake his head at her story. How sick and twisted do you have to be to convince a young kid that she is worse than muck on her shoe, then straight out of hell into enslavement and a biker gang? Those who harmed her must undoubtedly have their own hellish cell. Mike couldn't help but think of himself as a great equalizer. Maybe that's why he did everything he could to help Laura. After that first night, he was scared he would never see this strange tramp again. But as if on cue, Laura appeared at Villa Piano's pub the next night. And the next, and the next. She almost made it possible for him to do things for her that no one else had done before. Their conversations grew in depth, from general to specific, impersonal to intimate. They talked about everything, how John Kennedy handled the obligations of the presidency. Laura was a fervent liberal who admired him for her favorite music. Her interest was jazz, particularly Miles Davis, and how they viewed their future. Laura hoped to earn a diploma in business management. They grieved together, but mostly they laughed. Mike could be himself around her. Inevitably, their conversation progressed beyond pub talk and common sense. Mike began inventing reasons for Jessica to get out of the house and spend time with Laura, whether it was a milkshake, a nice frozen, or a late-night walk beneath the stars. His girlfriend was strangely ignorant to what was going on, since she was almost fully focused on work and the drive home. Mike's guilt intensified with each passing day, even as the seeds sown during their initial meeting grew and blossomed into something lovely. The climax occurred several weeks after Memorial Day. Mike and Jessica saved money as their stints at the pizza became more normal. This prompted Jessica to get an automobile. It was unexpected, but Mike agreed. He accompanied her to the Winterset sales and repair parking area on the west side of Route 64, directly behind the old VFW building. Mike had lived in 1962 long enough to be used to seeing vehicles drive by, but when he entered the parking lot, he couldn't help but be astonished. It was a veritable museum exhibit of cars that were selling for peanuts relative to their 2020 values. "I believe I died and went to heaven," he replied, practically drooling. "What's with boys and their toys?" Jessica sighed and rolled her eyes. "A car that can simply transport us from point A to point B is sufficient for me." Mike approached a dark blue automobile with a sign on the grille reading 1959 and suggested that we consider a Corvette. "We could look into something cheaper," she suggested, pointing to the $3,000 price tag. "I admit that the price of a 3-year-old car would be extraordinary where we are from, but it is currently too pricey. It's great that Mr. Villa Piano consented to pay us some money in advance." Mike patted his new wallet. I believe he has a tremendous sympathy for the newlyweds who were left penniless. There will still be time for the present. I'm not worried about it, even if this ring turns my finger green. Jessica spoke, spinning her finger with the dull ring that was hardly visible in the sunlight. Time travel or not, I still intend to become Mrs. Montgomery one day. Mike was no longer sure if this was part of his strategy. His priorities shifted dramatically as a result of the time he spent trying to save Laura. Perhaps if you play your cards correctly, he added with a smile. Are you sure your friend, the bartender, understands what he's doing with those bogus driver's licenses? Jessica took out a thin rectangle from her shirt pocket. It was imprinted on it. Jessica Montgomery in capital letters with facts mentioned underneath. The residence was reported as 905 Elmwood, and the birth date was September 11th, 1944. There isn't even a photograph here. Technically, I could be anything. Maurice is a former immigrant who came to America from Italy after World War II. He has shady pals who helped him get fraudulent paperwork to enter the nation. They taught him all of the tricks. Mike responded by bringing out a similar ID from his pocket, which showed his date of birth as July 13th, 1944. When I accidentally found out about this during a conversation, he didn't ask questions when I requested him to assist us. Photographs will not be necessary in Wisconsin for many years. Everything is much easier here with security. Did you know, for example, that Villa pianos rarely lock their doors at night? People here in 1962 had a significantly higher level of trust. They have no reason to be fearful of their neighbors, let alone most strangers. It's unfortunate that things have changed so drastically in 2020, Jessica muttered, resting against the rear fender of a bright green wood-paneled pickup truck with wide white tires. I suppose that addresses my question regarding whether Maurice can be trusted. A chatterbox is an invaluable tool for spies. Mike recited a sentence from the night he met Laura. In addition, he understands what it means to have someone guard your back. Honestly, I believe he is still an illegal immigrant, but I don't care. For me, a person's character is far more significant than where he was born. How can I help you two? A startling voice boomed out. They turned around to see a stocky man in greasy blue overalls, his silver hair cut into a flat wile. He blinked in the brilliant June sun, clutching a chewed stub of a cigar. Mike said that the lady is seeking for a dependable automobile, and he noted the car salesman's surprised expression. Women driving were no longer rare, but those who purchased their own car rather than using their husband's vehicle drew attention. What interests you, madam? How about this fantastic Nash? There's plenty of trunk space, as you can see, for trips to the market, he continued, attempting to sell Jessica on a car that was the 1950s equivalent of a grocery truck. She may have looked fashionable in 1962, but attempting to capture her attention through utilitarianism appeared sexist and bound to fail. I think I prefer this truck better, she added, patting the side of the car. The mechanic took the cigarette butt out of his mouth and leaned down to examine the inscription on the glass. Are you sure, madame? It's merely mechanics, he explained politely. However, his tone made it apparent that he felt Jessica was nuts. Mike realized what was going on and decided to straighten things up. Sir, I taught her how to drive a manual car, whether 3 on the column or 4 on the floor. My wife won't have any problems with this, I assure you, he said. His fiancée glanced at him, perplexed, but his hand motion persuaded her to agree that this was plenty for the technician. Mike has become considerably nicer since confirming Jessica's IQ. So, young girl, would you like to test the car? He asked nicely. The 1953 Dodge B-Series truck was slightly angular, but it featured a solid bottom and plenty of legroom. Jessica took a few moments to adjust to the controls before starting the engine and headed out on Highway 64. She found it a little jerky, with a short clutch pedal and floor-mounted shifter, and the manual steering required some effort, but overall it was a love affair at first sight. They quickly returned to Winterset sales and repair to complete their purchase. "Let me negotiate," Mike said as they stepped out of the truck. The mechanic was already approaching them with the same nice grin as the salesman, accompanied by her partner. Jessica was able to purchase the automobile for $275, $50 less than the advertised price, and also received a full tank of gas and temporary license plates for 15 days. They were soon driving back along Route 64, toward Minnesota. I'm inhaling in the pure rural air with the windows down. The local AM radio station DJ played singles by popular Soulja Boy groups The Shirelles, Peppermint Twist, Joey D, and the Tokens' The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Mike hasn't had this much fun with his girlfriend since they were booted out on time. Suddenly, they came across a steep cliff overlooking the road on the right side. On its large surface was a spectacular mural of the cosmos, with planets, stars, and suns. Nearby, a sign encircled by bright lights said Galaxy Drive-In. Mike knew exactly how they would spend their occasional free evening. Fortunately, Jessica didn't have to do much convincing. She added, "I heard about this place," as they waited in a queue of 24 automobiles for the gates to open. The day was approaching another magnificent sunset, and there wasn't much time to wait. Didn't its ruins stand behind the bypass road in 2020? He nodded, recalling how all of the shops along the old highway closed when the new route was established. Now it was a ruin, slowly disintegrating among the pines, bushes, and weeds as nature slowly reclaimed the space. With any luck, their appearance will change the fate of this place. My friends and I loved exploring this place as children. I remember how the desolation made me feel like the galaxy had been abandoned by time. "I hope time does not forget us," she said, intertwining her fingers and leaning her red head against his shoulder. His loneliness faded after he made connections here in 1962, such as with Laura and Maurice, but Jessica's shyness left her feeling isolated. Mike did not take it lightly. Instead, his attention was pulled to the theater's movie schedule, which included a double feature of John Wayne's classics The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Hatari. Under the sign, it was stated that audiences may expect fiery sequences featuring the hero of westerns himself. Mike responded, "I'm back in the saddle, Pilgrim," attempting to mimic the actor's slow accent but failing miserably. However, Jessica did not appear to mind. With a line of automobiles running well beyond their line of sight and the coldness of evening falling over the ground, the gates finally opened, and a guy wearing thick black spectacles seated in a windowed booth began serving customers one at a time. Jessica made a wide circle and was lucky enough to obtain a seat in the front row. Mike gazed around, absorbing the bustling scene. It was exactly what the archival photos from 2020 showed, a well-used playground with swings and merry-go-rounds. In the foreground, there is a gravel driveway with parking spaces marked by bollards with built-in speakers and a central concession stand. However, important details could not be preserved in a grainy black and white shot. It was sight for tired eyes, sound for tired ears, and scent for tired noses. The smell of hot butter and popcorn as well as exhaust fumes hung in the air. The laughter of children and the noise of teenagers echoed as they circled the cars nearby. A car radio was playing a tune at high blast. Wanderer performed on adults, sat in folding chairs, barbecued on makeshift barbecues, drank cheap beer and grilled hot dogs. Everyone was determined to have a good time. Mike had seen The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance on TBS in the future, but the sensation was altogether different. Watching it here in 1962, when John Wayne had recently starred in this famous Western, everything on the screen came to life on an astounding scale. Finally, when Wayne's character acknowledges to Jimmy Stewart's character that he was responsible for the film's title event, the entire set erupts in whistles and cheers. Mike stated it was a fantastic performance, clapping his fists till he got red, like everyone else. Wayne is the undisputed king of Hollywood. Alexander Valentine is the only actor that, in my opinion, comes close to him. "Is this the cowboy from the TV show San Antonio?" Jess asked. I saw multiple repetitions of this episode, which included Mr. Villa on piano. That's what keeps him from surpassing Wayne in his business. He said that he spends too much time watching television. Then a wonderful idea appeared on his face. Imagine if John Wayne and Alexander Valentine collaborated on a Western. This would be a film for all time. Mike asked Jessica if she wanted to walk around the grounds and compare Galaxy's appearance during the height of its fame to what it will become in the future. But she preferred to stay in the newly purchased truck and watch the cartoons that were presented during the break. He put his hands in his pockets and proceeded to attentively examine the locals, gradually moving nearer the territory's edge, which was enclosed by a wooden fence in the final rows. The movement slowed down noticeably. A deep grove of oaks and pines gave even more solitude for the few couples who cared more about establishing a pleasant, lovely ambiance than the film itself. Mike noted how a dark blue Studebaker and a massive Edsel swung rhythmically, so he walked past them in a wide arc to give the pair privacy. The only other automobile in the passion zone, an old Volkswagen Beetle with avocado-colored paint and rust marks on the body, did not pique his interest. He was ready to return to Jessica and her evasion when suddenly the headlights of the little Beetle blinked a couple of times after him. "Michael Montgomery? Is it you?" A familiar feminine voice rang forth. Mike looked back and saw Laura's face reflected in the moonlight outside the driver's window, smiling from ear to ear. He immediately forgot where he was headed and concentrated on where he ended up. What an unexpected encounter. He spoke while bending over and placing his elbows on her car door. She laughed and gazed at him with bright green eyes. Laura said, "I'm full of surprises." Mike responded, "I don't doubt it." And before he knew it, she moved in and kissed him on the lips. The sweet scent of vanilla perfume permeated his nostrils. "Where did you get the car?" "I assumed you arrived into town by bus." "I arrived, but now I'm moving up in life," she responded proudly. "For the time being, I am still living in a motel on the highway, but now I work full-time in a canning factory in Richmond. I was weary of taking public transportation, so I took out a loan from a local bank and purchased this car in the winter, set up sales and repairs a few days ago. I know it's not Stingray, but it's my car, and that's the main thing." "So how do you like it?" Mike stepped back to examine the Volkswagen Beetle. He didn't know much about German technology and preferred American vehicles, but this one was far superior to some of the monsters he'd seen in the parking lot today. "If it gets you from point A to point B safely, that's not too awful," he said. The unexpected reminder of where he was and who he was with made him uncomfortable. Mike's legs ached to return to Jessica, but other parts of his body seemed to keep him in the present. "What is it, Mr. Montgomery?" "Are I making you nervous?" Laura asked, noting his uneasiness. "Or maybe you have more essential things to accomplish." He frowned. "What do you mean?" A confident smile lit up her plump lips. "Do not fool me. I saw you enter with the red-haired girl. You worked together at Villa Piano. She's your girlfriend, correct?" Mike breathed deeply. He got captured. But why did Laura seem so pleased? "How long did you know about this?" he asked. "For quite a while now," she responded. "Why didn't you inform me about her sooner? It is a long story." "Well, that's a long night. Why don't you just sit down and tell me everything?" She nodded toward the passenger seat. Mike hesitated. "Consider the advantages and downsides." He moved his sight to the television, which flickered like a light in the night. An animated character was carrying a sign that read 1 minute left before the movie began. He was well aware that if he got into the car with Laura, he would have to explain himself to Jessica later. Nonetheless, his feet drove him along the gravel and beetle perspiration flooded his body, sensing the palpable danger of the situation. But after seeing Laura in her black shorts and off-the-shoulder flowery shirt, he thought the risk was worthwhile. Small inside the Beetle, It turned out to be more spacious than he thought. His head did not touch the ceiling, nor did his knees touch the dashboard. "What is your astrological sign, soldier?" Laura inquired, raising an outlined brow with heavy eyeliner. She licked her delicate pink lipstick lips, hoping for a response. "I assumed we were going to chat about my girlfriend," Mike remarked gently. She went silent. The strained hush could only have been broken by a falling pin. Her eyes narrowed. "Do you actually want to talk about your girlfriend right now?" "Continue." "No." Mike finally spoke. "I thought so," Laura replied. She leaned in and began showering him with quick, soft kisses. "Laura, what are you doing with me?" he inquired, feeling his breath stop in his chest. She said, "I'm trying to take away your pain, just as you're trying to take away mine." "How do you know I am in pain?" "Michael, you may try to act like a strong and silent macho, but we women have our own methods of discovering the truth. You are torn." "I bet I know why." "Am I that readable?" Laura agreed and nodded. "Your girlfriend means nothing to me. All I know is that she cannot give you what you want or need. Can you help me get what I need?" His speech seemed more like a declaration than a question. "I could tell you, but I'd like to show you," she whispered. "You are so gorgeous. I think I am falling in love with you," he said truly. "They love me," she replied in a soft Southern accent, which at that moment sounded especially charming. "You mean right now?" "Here?" Mike inquired, attempting to sort out his feelings. Laura reassured him that he would not be like the others in Dallas. They were all attempting to take something from me, my innocence, my trust, my soul. But in the last several weeks, you've taught me what it's like to live, to breathe fresh air, to have my trust in humanity restored. What better place than this? And what better time than now to show my appreciation? I would never go into this with any expectations." He responded honestly. "That's what makes it perfect. What makes it special. We would willingly give ourselves to each other. No expectations, no judgment. There was no criticism, nothing. Nothing but you and I, and how we feel about one another. A song's lines could be heard somewhere in the distance, coming from an old radio beat. I got the chills tonight. Completely clear your mind. You express your affection so sweetly. Love is flashing in your eyes today. Will you love me tomorrow?" Mike did not consider about tomorrow. All his concentration was concentrated on the present moment. Laura went closer to him, settling on his lap for slow, passionate kisses. He did his best to tame his inner beast, but to no effect. Both became trapped in this intimate moment. This is a treasure for life or just quick joy. Can I believe the magic of your sighs? That you will love me tomorrow? Movie sounds were playing in the background danger with John Wayne, but neither of them paid attention to it. Today, without saying anything, you claim I'm the only one. But will my heart break? When will the night give way to the early sun? Good things come to those who wait. Soldier. She said, "I've been waiting for you my whole life," Mike answered. Her eyes sparkled as she sobbed quietly. "You understand how to seduce a female. I'm just describing what I observe. Oh, if I could bottle this moment and cherish it forever, I would," she whispered. "I think I would do the same." Mike's response was sincere. She raised her head and stared into his eyes. "Do you know what? I think you should join me. Not with that other girl. We are made for each other. You feel it, right?" Mike froze, his thoughts confused. "I know how I feel now, and I want to make sure that feeling lasts tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and in a week. I don't want this to be merely a passing trend." "Do you comprehend me?" he said softly, as if it were a passing hobby. What an interesting expression. She frowned and pondered his words. "Nonetheless, I believe I get what you mean." Mike sighed, feeling like he had said more than he wanted to. His comments needed to be more careful so as not to reveal the fact that he was from another era. Then give me a few days to decide what to do with Jessica. Everything is pretty confusing right now. Jessica? Is that her name? Laura said his girlfriend's name, and his heart plummeted horribly. This made the situation even more realistic. Jessie Wilder. We've been together for approximately 2 years, but it appears our paths have begun to separate. Laura spoke quietly. Mike gazed at the movie screen, where John Wayne was racing across the African plains, attempting to lasso a zebra. He sensed that time was running out for him. They dressed in silence and avoided eye contact. Laura stopped him as he was about to get out of the car. Okay, I'll let you go now, with one condition. Tell me you love me as much as I love you. Mike softly ran his hand through her hair before leaning in to kiss her. I don't know how it occurred, but you drove me insane, Laura, he whispered. Her face brightened with a smile. She let him go with contentment. Mike stepped out of the car and gave her one last wave before walking down the gravel road back to his fiancée. His excuse to Jessica that night was that he was sick and spent the entire time on the toilet. This story seemed convincing enough to him to not require further explanation, but Mike soon became seriously ill. Mike felt nauseous, as if a higher power had decided to punish him for his actions. For 3 days, he was in bed with the flu. Even Maria Piano, who is typically rigid and inflexible, showed uncommon compassion and called the family doctor. Mike was struck by his appearance. A small old man with a shock of gray hair and a black suitcase, like a character from an old television series, entered the room and gave advice with a friendly smile. Mike was worried about his job at the pizzeria, but Antonia's father, Angelo, assured him that he would keep the job. Jessica, meanwhile, looked after him as best she could when she didn't have a shift at the bar. Her concern only increased the feeling of guilt for betrayal. Every time he thought about breaking up with her, Mike remembered the situation they were in. It was as if they had been shipwrecked on a desert island in time, with no way to get home. He was the only person she felt close to here. These thoughts hindered Mike from making judgments. However, he saw that this could not go on for long. Following his recovery, he resumed his piano work. The first day turned out to be calm. Laura didn't show up at the restaurant, and Mike began to think that maybe she had disappeared again. Maybe the Hells Bells motorcycle group discovered her and returned her to Texas, or she ran away from them and relocated to another city. If so, he would choose to cherish the memories of her smile and the passion they shared forever. But the next day, Laura reappeared at the bar, and their secret relationship resumed with vigor. Mike made reasons night after night to stay late at work or leave the house, meeting Laura again at her motel or in secluded places like the one where they first became close. Their relationship was intense and passionate, but the awareness of his own guilt remained with him. Laura appeared to avoid discussing Jessica, but Mike knew it would happen sooner or later. Every night, he became increasingly consumed by his own emotions, torn between the two women who had entered his life. It happened in a strange manner. One night, at the end of June, after having just made love in her chamber, they were both sleeping on an antique bed that creaked with every movement, their heads resting on a pile of pillows. The air rustling through the curtains from a neighboring window cooled his heated skin as a tune played from the radio speakers along the far wall. Little Anthony and the Imperials performed "Tears on My Pillow." So, what did Jessica say after you told her about us? Laura asked unexpectedly. Mike, who was looking at the mold streaks that scattered the ceiling, was caught off guard by the question and had no time to deflect. Sorry, there are too many distractions. I didn't have time to tell her the news. What exactly are you talking about? There's no time. You had 3 weeks. What is the matter? Are you ashamed of me? Laura crossed her arms across her naked breast. Why should I be ashamed of you? How can you think like that? It's simply that circumstances have changed. I don't think time is a luxury we can afford. What do you mean? Mike scratched his unkempt hair after sex. Are you leaving Winterset? Is it farewell, alligator? No, that is not the point. Laura looked down at her hands, which were mindlessly toying with the bedspread. I have news for you, and I'm not sure how you'll take it. A creeping, frightening sensation ran down his spine. What happened? Honey? I'm pregnant, she explained simply, watching his expression. Mike made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. Is that my child? He inquired, and quickly realized that he had made a mistake when she shot him. An angry look. He raised his hands defensively. Hey, that's a legitimate question given that you've had other men. I understand that was not your fault, but nevertheless. Listen, I'm not a woman of easy virtue, she explained. You've been the only one since I went away from Dallas, and that's been over 3 months. This is clearly not the virgin birth. Why? For God's sake, didn't we use protection? How stupid could I be? Mike hid his face with his hands. I wanted this no less than you, and perhaps even more. Laura stroked his shoulder. I thought you'd be happy. This will get us closer. We can, dare I say it, become a family. We only met a month ago. I barely know you. He heard himself say that the news she had just delivered had not yet really hit home. Well, I know enough about you to want to know more, she said, kissing his temple. I can already see it. I'll be Mrs. Laura Montgomery, and we'll have 5 or 6 children and a little house here in town, with a white picket fence and a vegetable garden in the backyard. I had always wanted to try my hand at gardening. The walls appeared to shut in around him. For a moment, it occurred to him to suggest that Laura should terminate the pregnancy, but he immediately remembered that normal treatment methods will become a reality only in 11 years, and he himself considered this a barbaric practice. Are you sure you're pregnant? I mean, did you go to the doctor and confirm this? I had a sense, so a couple of weeks ago I went to the hospital for a checkup and took a urine test. The results were positive. Do you want to view the documents? Mike bit his tongue hard, almost tasting blood. No, everything's fine. I believe you. Isn't it wonderful? I've never felt more alive. Everything will be for the better. You'll see. We'll get married and I'll be the best wife for you. I will cook all your meals, clean the house, and take care of our children. How many children? Mike asked dryly. I believe 6 is a good number. You can't expect me to be barefoot and pregnant all the time. Laura laughed. I thought you intended to earn a degree in business management. How are you going to find time for this if you become a housewife? Mike was clutching at straws, half forgetting that most women in the early 60s did not consider it a sin to be housewives. On the contrary, many saw it as an honor. Who has time for such nonsense today? Priorities have changed. If there was one lesson I remember from the nuns at the orphanage, it was that a good wife always obeys and serves her husband. Laura asserted this as gospel truth. Outdated views were one thing, but Mike was more concerned by her unexpected lack of self-confidence. This Texas native's inner strength had been growing by leaps and bounds since they met. So why did it all suddenly disappear? Because of a child? He liked passionate and purposeful women, but what could he do now? Everything has already been decided. Mike couldn't change what had already happened. We have no other options. I need to tell Jessica about you and me, right now, Mike stated. He got out of bed and started getting dressed. We shouldn't tell her about our baby. Laura softly touched her flat stomach. Nobody should know about this, for that matter. Just one controversy can make us leave the city. That's why we need to get married as soon as possible. Yes. Of course. Mike's head was spinning from how fast everything was moving. She continued issuing directions. Perhaps it would be best to get married before you inform Jessica. Then she won't be able to dissuade you at the final moment. Yes. Of course. Mike spoke again. The words echoed in his mind as if they were playing with acoustics. Laura knelt on the bed, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. The blanket slid down and gathered around her ankles. "Maybe we'll tie the knot tomorrow. My love, I've heard that you can have a civil ceremony at the county courthouse for practically pennies. Tomorrow I'm working better the day after tomorrow." Her scorching kiss on the temple left a terrible aftertaste, but she didn't appear to notice. "This is a terrific idea. I'll have one more day to get everything ready. We have one more day to figure out how to get out of this problem," Mike thought. But deep down in his heart, he knew he had lost. Laura already had an ace up her sleeve, her belly which was growing every day. All that remained was to pull yourself together and accept the inevitable. It's incredible how little bureaucracy there was in 1962. Mike found out 2 days later when he found himself with Laura 15 miles south of Winterset in Hudson, the county seat near the courthouse. He wore one of Angelo Piano's old dark suits for the occasion, and his future wife wore a cream dress from a bargain store with matching shoes. There was no pomp, no ceremony, no decorations of any kind. Mike showed a phony ID and paid $12 for a marriage license in the first-floor lobby before the pair reached a tiny office where they were met by a sad-looking judge. His black robe fluttered as he stood behind the carved table, holding a ragged old Bible in his hands, and waved for them to come over. "Do you have a ring?" he asked. Mike acquired a ring from the same pawn shop as Jessica bought her false engagement ring. He said, "Here it is, Your Honor," and took the jewelry from his breast pocket. "Put it on the bride's finger and repeat after me." The groom listened carefully. Then put a gold ring on the fourth finger of her left hand. His brain was buzzing. The blood was roaring in his ears. The whole thing was absolutely crazy. However, his Texas rose was in full bloom today and had definitely put a lot of effort into appearing gorgeous. Her smile was so bright that it seemed to illuminate the entire room. "I give this ring to you as a symbol of my love and fidelity. It reflects the pledge of my heart and soul to you. I take you, Laura, to be my wife. I swear to be faithful in thick and thin, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. And now you, madam, take your fiancé his hand and repeat after me," said the judge. Mike's heart pounded as he gazed into her warm, confident green eyes. The fact that she didn't have the money to buy a ring for him was the last thing on his mind right now. "I take you, Michael, to be my lawful spouse. I promise to love, respect, and obey in sorrow and joy, in sickness and in health, until death do us part," she said, winking at him. This wink was about the word obey in the oath. They had discussed it before, and Mike was sure that such an archaic word should have been deleted from the text. But apparently Laura decided to leave him for some reason of her own. Then, "By the authority vested in me by the county of Sanquar and the state of Wisconsin, I pronounce you husband and wife." "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery," the judge said, shaking their hands. He then took out his fountain pen, dipped it in the inkwell, and signed the marriage license. Laura turned to face Mike. "Aren't you going to kiss your new wife?" Mike, despite having a lump in his throat, did as she asked. "I love you, darling. You make me the happiest man on earth," he said with a tight smile. "You'll see, honey, even if it was a wedding for the sake of a child, we can fix everything." "The main thing is to believe," Laura said, took his hand, and as if by magic, they left the courthouse as a married couple. "Now comes the hard part," telling Jessica. Mike said as if he had lead weights on his feet. Laura said that now is the best time. They got into her Beetle, and its rear engine chugged to life. Volkswagen's top model coughed and pushed away, leaving a trail of exhaust fumes behind it. There were no tin cans rattling behind them, no colored ribbons flapping in the wind, no sign reading. Just married. They were now Mr. and Mrs. Michael Montgomery. Period. Waiting for death. It's worse than death itself. Although Mike had his new wife for support, the 15-mile walk to Winterset felt like an excruciatingly tedious march. He imagined Jessica shredding him to pieces. And then what? Where will she go? What will she do? Will she do something stupid and self-destructive? Oh no. Look who's here, Mike said as they finally turned onto Elmwood. The setting for his confession couldn't have been worse. Jessica was in the yard helping Antonia and Maria hang laundry on the drying rack. He didn't need an audience, but it was too late. The three women had already seen the distinctive green Beetle with rust patches that Laura had parked by the side of the road. They were already looking at its passengers with interest. It's preferable to pull off the bandage right away. Laura patted him on the knee. Mike closed his eyes for the last time and wished for the world to descend underground and swallow him up. When this did not happen, he realized the time of reckoning had come. Gathering his resolve, he added, "Let's go get this over with before I lose my composure." Jessica, wearing an ankle-length skirt, hastily walked to the car. "Hello, dear. Where have you been all day?" she asked as he got out of the Beetle. Then she noticed his companion. "Who are your friends?" "I'm Laura," she said, walking around the car to shake her hand. "Are you the same lady who usually hangs out at the Piano's Tavern in the evenings, looking for gentlemen?" Antonia asked enthusiastically, running closer. "Control yourself, young woman." Maria sharply besieged her, obeying her pious nature. Her disapproving expression seemed to freeze everyone around her. "Remember the golden rule? Do unto others what you would have them do to you." "Yes, ma'am," the teenager muttered, clearly not sorry, especially given how she rolled her eyes. "It's very nice to meet you and Jessica, Mike's lover," she said, responding to Laura's gesture. "Did you give him a ride home?" "Yes, you might say that," Mike muttered, looking down and swaying in place. "I see you're dressed well. Have you attended an interview?" "No, we just came from the district court in Hudson. Aren't you in trouble?" Jessica patted him on the back, trying to cheer him up. He tried to wipe the sweat from his forehead. "Jess, perhaps you should sit down," Mike said, barely audible. Jessica spotted a car tire nearby that Angelo had once used for a swing and sat on it, staring at Mike eagerly. "What is the matter? You can tell me anything. Everything will be fine." Mike pulled himself together, feeling his heart clench with shame. "Today I married Laura. We entered into a civil marriage. She's my wife," he finally said without looking up. Jessica blinked a few times, as if she wanted to be sure she had heard him correctly. "What is this? April Fool's Day? Is this your version of some awful joke? If that's the case, it's not very funny." Her voice became tight, and her eyes squinted. Antonia stood nearby with her mouth open in surprise. But of course, Maria Piano, who overheard the conversation, hastened to intervene to express her opinion. "Shut your ears." She instructed her daughter, who, sarcastically obeying, covered her ears with her hands for a time. Maria, turning to Mike, spoke sharply. "Listen, Mr. Montgomery, Angelo and I welcomed you two into our home by trusting you. You have acted disgustingly, misleading us and taking advantage of our Christian kindness. How could you?" Mike understood that a difficult battle awaited him on two fronts. On the one side, Jessica's exposure, on the other, Marina Villa's rage at the piano. But he had no choice but to attempt to cushion the blow. "Mrs. Villa Piano, we first came to you for assistance. We were in a desperate situation, homeless, hungry. We had no other choice." Yes, I admit that Jessica and I lied to get a place to live and food. But you can't deny that it worked out well for all parties. You and Mr. Villa Piano gained additional income-generating tenants as well as 2 employees to help your business. Money is the root of all evil, and I wouldn't call you 2 reliable people if you hid the truth from the beginning," Maria snapped. "Mom, it appears that your tight hairstyle has overwhelmed your common sense." Antonia suddenly intervened. Maria turned to look at her daughter, unable to believe what she had heard. But Antonia continued boldly, looking into her mother's eyes. "Mike was simply attempting to cover for me. I knew from the very beginning that he and Jessica were not married. But what should I have done when they asked for help?" Do you remember the parable of the Good Samaritan? I was just following the biblical example. Yes, but not under false pretenses. How do you know where in the gospel this is written? Don't be insolent to me, young lady. You must respect your parents. Haven't you read the scripture? Exodus 2012 states that you should honor your father and mother. And I also read Matthew 7:1. Judge not lest ye be judged, Antonia retorted. Maria's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. Go to your room. I want to take a rod and whip you, she threatened. Although Mike had never seen his parents lay a hand on Antonia, the threat still sounded serious. Antonia winked at Mike before departing and followed her mother into the house right before the door closed behind them. Maria looked back and shouted severely, You three, don't move. I'm not finished with you yet. Now let us get back to business, Jessica said, getting up from the swing. She moved closer to Laura, their faces almost touching. Listen here. I'm not sure who you are or where you came from, but Winterset is too small for the two of us. I'd like you to depart town before sunset. Watching westerns like San Antonio and Gunsmoke with Angelo made Jessica feel invulnerable. However, considering what Mike's new wife went through, the meek, red-haired Daisy was more of a comedy character. Well, then pack your things, cowboy, and go out into the open spaces. Because I'm here for a long time. Laura turned her left hand so that her wedding ring sparkled in the sunlight. Have you gotten the point? This prompted Jessica to look at the inexpensive ring Mike had given her to make their relationship appear more serious. It's no surprise that I was never really worth anything. You were constantly glancing at someone else. She ripped the ring off and tossed it at him, furious. Please, Jessica. Believe me, I never wanted it to turn out like this, Mike stated. She shakes her head. Very convenient. These things don't just happen, you know. For that matter, I'm pregnant, Laura said. We wanted to be married before it became evident. Consider the scandal that an unmarried mother could cause in our city. Mike was just doing the right thing. Wait. Are you pregnant? This revelation affected her nearly as much as their wedding. When did this happen? So, we've been dating for about a month. So it happened right after we returned. That is, we have arrived in the city. Jessica almost gave away the secret that she and Mike came from the 21st century. Someday he will tell his new wife about this, but this is not the time or place. We met one night, and everything just happened. You know how it goes. He realized the answer was overly wide and ludicrous, yet it was still true. No, I genuinely don't know, so tell me. Explain why I devoted 2 years of my life to you. We should have married and had children, not you and a random girl. Her fingers were like daggers as she pointed them at the newlyweds. His flailing defense had left him perplexed, but her verbal attack on Laura had him on the defensive. She isn't some random girl, okay? This is a woman who knows exactly what she wants and is not afraid to pursue it. This is great and refreshing in our environment. He wrapped his arm around Laura's shoulders to emphasize his point. She hugged his waist in response. But have you even thought about the ramifications of your actions? You heard Mrs. Villa's piano. We will most likely be kicked out. Mike was about to answer, but instead motioned towards the front door. The head of the family stood on the threshold, this time accompanied by her husband, who was dressed in a red cardigan and tan trousers. Mr. Villapiano looked like he came out of the Mr. Rogers show next door, but the cornpipe in his mouth was reminiscent of the 60s. Maria virtually dragged her confused husband across the yard, saying, Angelo, do whatever you need to do. Let me figure things out, okay? He replied. Then he turned to Mike. Son, my wife claims you are not who you say you are. Would you like to explain? Sir, I am still the same Michael Montgomery that I always was. However, I may have presented certain information differently when we first met. You see, Jessica and I were not married. I would prefer not to disclose these circumstances. Forced us to accept Antonia's gracious offer of assistance. Sorry, but this was the only way. Angelo thoughtfully placed his hands in his pockets. The faint perfume of vanilla tobacco from his pipe wafted in the breeze. "Now I must comprehend that you are truly wedded to this young lady," he questioned, pointing to Laura. Mike's fiancée smiled and introduced herself before he opened the Beetle's passenger door and pulled out their marriage certificate. "The ink is still fresh, sir," he said. Angelo glanced from one to the other many times. "I think I get what's going on here, young woman. You." He clearly intended to say pregnant, but he stopped in time. Laura accepted the hint and nodded. "Yes," she replied gently, resting her hands on her stomach. "Mrs. Villa's piano seems ready to burst at any moment." Angelo sensed this and resolved to stop it before his wife made it into a circus act. "Calm down, Maria," he advised. "I'd like to know Michael's plans for the future of his new family. Of course, sir, I'll do the responsible thing. I was hoping to seek for your permission to stay in the spare room while continuing to work at Philip Piano's pizzeria. I need to work hard and save money so that one day we can be contributing members of society. As pillars of our community, you and your family have the opportunity to set an example for us." Mike stood up straight and solid, and it looks that appealing to Angelo's feeling of religious obligation and civic responsibility was effective. His chest even moved forward with pride. "I am always happy to witness a remorseful individual recognize his mistakes. I applaud you, son, for taking the bull by the horns. I have to add that you remind me of myself when I was younger. You might be shocked at what was considered forbidden in the 1920s, but, as they say, things change." "Angelo, are you crazy?" his wife interjected, as if to stop him from discussing something embarrassing from their past that they would rather keep private. "What I'm saying, Michael, is that forgiving is the Christian thing to do. So I will give you a second chance. You and the new Mrs. Montgomery can stay here. You can also continue working in my pizzeria. You are a hard worker and I do not want to lose you. If you are willing to take on new tasks, you may get promoted shortly, whatever it takes, sir. Thank you very much. You will not regret it." Mike wasn't about to bite the hand that fed him. He shook hands with his landlord with great enthusiasm. "Okay, son. Attempt to justify the trust. Let's go. Maria, allow the youth to mind their own thing." Mrs. Villa's piano was nearly kicked away from the scene. "This is fantastic," Jessica exclaimed, leaning on the fender of her truck stopped in front of Laura's Beetle. "I was left without both a boyfriend and a place to live. And where should I go now? Please tell." Mike's sense of loyalty to his ex-girlfriend remained strong even after he married. He couldn't simply leave her to fend for herself in an unknown situation. "Let me speak with Mr. Villa Piano and ask if you may relocate into Antonia's basement. Your life has already been flipped upside down. I am not going to live under the same roof as this." Jessica responded angrily, "With this home wrecker." "What are you going to do? You do not know anyone here. If you stay at Villa Piano for the time being, you will have enough time to recover. The world outside can be unkind. Tell me about it. You are demonstrating this to me brilliantly right now." Mike nodded. "Okay, I deserved it. I behaved like a selfish, insensitive moron. But I am human, and people make mistakes. Of course, this one undoubtedly smashed all the records, but now I'm stuck in a situation from which I can't get out even if I tried. Can you put your emotions aside and understand that this is a logical decision?" Jessica could only see the road ahead of her at that point. She turned suddenly and walked away into the grass. She left the newlyweds alone. "She will be all right," Mike muttered, watching his ex-girlfriend go. "I hope so," Laura said. "What about us? Are you certain I can't open my birthday present right now?" Mike inquired, sitting in the Beetle's passenger seat. Laura smiled and shook her head. She batted his hand away with a joking gesture. He had to lean lower to try again, because the hem of her skirt was right between her knees and ankles. "Remove your hands from the items, soldier." Laura smiled and added, "Besides, it's nice for a girl to play hard to get." Coquettishly, she promised Mike new sexy lingerie to take off that night. They had gone to Richmond for supper at the Silver Dollar restaurant and were now in the back row of an open-air movie theater parking lot, celebrating Mike's 18th birthday appropriately. He answered, "I can think of something much more fun. The first film tonight promises to be thrilling, honey. The principal actress in this film will begin filming a new television show this fall." Laura rolled her eyes, as if attempting to recollect Catherine Kennedy. Yes, it is her name, and the show will be titled American Dreams. This piqued Mike's curiosity, to say the least. He was always drawn to anything involving the woman who would become America's love. "What's the film's name, dear?" he inquired, though he was almost convinced he knew the answer. "The sign at the entrance read, 'Golden Road,'" she said. "This is the narrative of a pioneer family traveling to California during the gold rush. I've always been captivated by the history of the Wild West. I observed you've made an impression on Mr. Villapiano by watching Gunsmoke with him every Saturday. Aside from his religious strictness, he is truly a pleasant person. I dare say he almost became a father figure to me because I never met my biological father." "I apologize," Mike replied, throwing his arm around her shoulders. "Have you ever considered finding out who your biological parents are, even if they are no longer alive? There may be records elsewhere. I don't know where to begin. Besides, all I need is you and our baby," she said, grabbing his hand, and they rubbed her belly. Even though he was on his honeymoon with his new bride, the fascination of the first screening of the Catherine Kennedy picture reignited a long-held affection in him. The Golden Road was more of an adventure film than a romance, but the actress charmed spectators as the eldest daughter of a pioneer family. Mike, like on his and Jessica's prom night, exploited Catherine's image to arouse love between himself and Laura. He projected Laura's visage from the silver screen onto the driver's seat of the Beetle while coaxing her. "I love my gift," he said. "Happy birthday, honey," Laura whispered, holding him. Mike had flashbacks to that night in 2020. He watched Black Friday again and felt Catherine Kennedy's picture take over his mind, both then and today. He fantasized about her, believing that she couldn't get enough of his attention. But, upon returning to reality, he saw his wife. Mike shook his head, attempting to erase these pictures from his mind, and looked at the TV, where the closing credits to the film The Golden Road were already playing. Is the movie already over? So, you know what they say. When you're having fun, time seems to fly by. He chuckled, attempting to conceal the shame of his dreams. "We're just acting like normal newlyweds. By the way, you could call it a minor miracle, but everything at the piano home is finally beginning to improve. I never imagined Jessica would take everything so calmly. Her move into the basement wasn't all that painless, but she appears to have come to grips with our marriage and your pregnancy. Now we're almost ready to start talking to each other without strain." "I'm happy I like Jessica," Laura stated. Mike stated that our relationship was already deteriorating. "Laura, your appearance served as a wake-up call for me. You motivated me to leave an unhealthy situation." He tenderly touched her stomach. "However, I believe our tiny prince deserves some praise as well. What happens if our little prince turns out to be a princess? So what will you do, Daddy?" Laura smiled, and her face lit up with a soft brightness. She grinned helplessly back. He imagined their future. "I will still love her, but she is unlikely to want to date boys as a teenager. So, I'll keep the double-barreled shotgun by the front door. I can already picture it. We will have a comfortable house with a wide yard for the kids to play in, and we will sit on the porch, drink lemonade, and watch them till we turn gray," she murmured dreamily. "That sounds like the ultimate life." Mike agreed. In comfortable silence, they watched the second half of a double feature at the Galaxy, which included Natalie Wood's film Gypsy. Laura rested against his chest, and Mike felt for the first time that the world of 1962 was becoming his home. Everything that had before seemed exotic now appeared familiar, as if he had always belonged in this history. Laura had already fallen asleep by the end of the session. Mike gingerly moved her into the passenger seat, taking care not to disturb her, and then attempted to figure out the archaic mechanics of the car. The pedals were uncomfortable, and the gears were tough to shift, but he made it out of the parking lot without inflicting any damage to either vehicle. "Honey, we're home," he whispered softly, caressing her shoulder as the Beetle drove up to the curb outside 905 Elmwood, following Jessica's pickup. Laura stirred. "Have I fallen asleep?" "Everything's fine. You can go directly upstairs to bed. I have a double shift tomorrow at Villa Piano." Mike was promoted to restaurant manager as a result of his expanded responsibilities at the pizza. His hours increased, but his passion and dedication made him the ideal choice for the position. The employees who had been there for years treated him with respect and caused almost no problems. If things continued at this rate, Mike could see himself buying the business from Mr. Villapiano and taking complete control. He even pictured a neon sign reading Montgomery's. They quietly entered the dark house. The tick-tock of a giant grandfather clock accompanied their walk across the living room's plush carpet towards the second-floor stairs. Jessica sat in the shadows. "How were the films?" she asked. When Mike and Laura emerged from the darkness, they recoiled in shock. "What are you doing on your feet so early, Jess?" Mike asked. "You'll be opening a pizzeria with me in a few hours. Why don't you try sleeping before then?" Her eyes gleamed in the darkness as her own eyes acclimated to the low lighting. His ex-girlfriend wore a stern and inscrutable expression. "Sleep can wait." "We have things to do that we can't," she said in a way that made Mike nervous. He owned. "Let's walk into the kitchen and sit down. I should at least sit down." Mike turned on the kitchen light, and everyone sat around an unusual table with a chrome strip down the center. "So, Jess, what is so vital that it cannot wait until breakfast? I have every reason to suspect that your wife lied when she claimed she was pregnant." Laura, she added, awoke abruptly from her half-sleep. "Well, you don't stand for ceremony. Why don't you just tell me how much you despise me?" Mike's wife spoke, her green eyes gleaming. "You didn't like me from the beginning." "Come on, Jess. Stop spewing hatred. I thought we were past your jealousy." Even though it was understandable, Mike advised to forget about it and go to sleep. "Furthermore, you might wake up Piano." This time she was adamant. "It is not a case of jealousy. The point is that she lied to you. She lied to me. She lied to everybody. And she probably just wants to keep a roof over her head." Mike's chair creaked on the linoleum as he rose. "Okay, I have had enough. I will not sit here and listen to you trash my wife. So, until you have strong evidence, we are going to bed. Let's go." "Honey." He took Laura's hand and helped her stand. Instead of cooperating, Jessica perked up. "Oh, I have evidence. And with a full collection of evidence, follow me." She stood up and nodded towards the stairs. Mike kept expecting she'd put an end to this charade, but with each step, her determination became stronger. Jessica walked into the living room and opened the door to the backyard. When she pulled the cord, a single light bulb illuminated their small island amid a sea of darkness. The humid air became sticky, attracting mosquitoes and moths, who circled the light in the distance. Crickets were chirping noisily. "Why are we here?" Mike asked impatiently, fighting insects. "Did you want proof? Here they are." Jessica lifted the aluminum lid of the Villa Piano family garbage bin. A foul odor invaded my nostrils. "I'm not sure what's so interesting about this." "Here it is," she remarked, picking up a stick from the ground and pointing to something white concealed beneath a waste bag. There was a dark area on one end. "You invited me here to demonstrate intimate hygiene items." Mike grasped his forehead. "Oh, Jess, this is too much. Is this true? How about this?" She waved a small white piece of paper in front of his face. "It's simply a receipt from the store. I still do not understand anything." Read what you bought, she insisted. Kotex pads. Congratulations. You have made the connection. Can we get back to bed now? Nancy sketched. You still do not understand, do you? It was in Laura's trousers pocket since I had bought them for Antonia. Do you know how shy Mrs. Villapiano is about such topics? Laura laughed. Mike was worried by her response, though. Why did her mood change so abruptly? Do you see? Problem fixed, he said, despite his reservations. I thought so too, until I discovered the box in her closet upstairs. It was torn, with only one gasket missing. How do you respond to this? Jessica crossed her arms across her chest, satisfied that she had put an end to the situation. How dare you invade my privacy and search through my belongings? Laura flushed and rushed toward Jessica. The trash can lid clattered into the cement as a struggle broke out. At this point, two neighbors' dogs began barking loudly, and a light turned on in one of the second-floor windows. It opened slightly, revealing a ragged Anglo village piano in its initial form. "What is that noise down there?" he asked, his voice irritated from a lack of sleep. Mike opened his lips to say something, but Jessica fled like a whirlwind. "Why don't you simply admit it? You coerced my boyfriend to marry you by claiming to be pregnant. I will not acknowledge to something I did not do." Laura shouted. Jessica started screaming. "You are a liar and a fraudster." Lights turned on one by one in the ground floor windows, covering virtually the entire backyard with soothing light. Soon later, Mr. and Mrs. Villapiano came on the threshold, dressed in pajamas and dressing gowns. Antonia followed, having been awakened by the sounds as well. "What's happening here? Do you even know what the time is?" The patriarch of the household questioned fiercely, putting his hands in the pockets of his robe. "Sorry, sir. I'm just trying to settle a quarrel between my wife and Jessica." Mike attempted to explain, hoping to defuse the situation. "You will wake up all the dead with your shouts," remarked Maria, whose hair was coiled in curlers and looked like a wig. "She is not pregnant." Jessica pointed a finger at Laura. "This is slander. Are you not ashamed? That is it." "I have had enough. I want you to leave my house now." Maria pointed to the street. "I can prove it." Jessica turned to the younger village. Piano. "Antonia, have you asked Laura to go get some pads?" The girl narrowed her eyes as if struggling to understand the question before slowly shaking her head. "Are we talking about gaskets?" "No. She did not buy me anything. At least I don't recall it." Jessica extended her arms triumphantly. "Do you understand what I told you?" Maria grasped her heart. "Lord Jesus, please forgive my daughter for her impure ideas." Mike stared at Laura, who looked like she'd been caught red-handed. "This is correct. Have you been lying to me the entire time?" I don't know what to say, except that I'm sorry," Laura responded in a quivering voice. "I planned to tell you, but I attempted to keep it a secret first, by all means. I desperately wanted to get pregnant, but I couldn't. I believe it will happen shortly. I really do." When Laura placed her hand on his shoulder, Mike immediately pushed her away. "That is not the point. You lied to me," he said, almost growling. "How can I trust you again? I swear this was the first and only time. I'll change. Please give me a chance. This has gone too far. You lied to my face about your pregnancy and used it to deceive me. I can't forget such a falsehood. I wasn't sure what to do. You remember what occurred to me in Dallas when I came here to Winterset and met you? I felt caught between the past and the future. My crazy side concluded that was the only way to avoid losing you. The only good thing I have is to get married. Pretending I was pregnant felt like the quickest solution. Then the ends justify the means." Mike looked at the break in the cement. "You could have told me the truth much sooner." "I would understand," he remarked gently. "It is too late now." Laura, panicked, attempted to stop him from obstructing his way. "Is it too late? What does this mean?" "This indicates I am leaving. I do not want to be even 1,000 miles away from you." Mike fought his way out of the nightmare. Angelo Piano attempted to obstruct his passage. It was a daring move, given that he weighed 30 or 40 pounds less than Mike. "Sorry, son, but I can't let you leave that easy. You have a responsibility to care for your wife, whether or not she is pregnant." "I'm sorry, sir, but if she can't be honest about major issues, how can I trust her about minor ones?" "No, you cannot do so anymore. If you feel a moral obligation, you can fulfill it." Mike decisively pushed him with his shoulder, as if at football practice, clearing the way for himself. Maria was ecstatic to get rid of him. "Great! Go and take Jessica with you. Take her and your immoral behaviors out of Wisconsin." "Good riddance!" she shouted after him as he dashed towards the stairs. Mike was fed up with Winterset, Wisconsin, and everything that reminded him of the previous 7 weeks. He wanted to depart as soon as possible and never look back. Mike walked up the stairs, hopping over the steps and hearing Laura's sobbing as Angelo screams behind him. None of this mattered anymore. He walked inside the bedroom, swiftly gathering the few items he had accumulated during his stay here and stuffing them into the canvas backpack Mr. Villa Piano had provided him. Without looking back or saying goodbye, he went downstairs, tossed his backpack over his shoulder, and departed. 905 Elmwood. "Michael, where are you going?" Laura's voice sounded from the dark side yard. He did not even turn his head. "I'm going somewhere no one knows my name," he explained as he continued to walk. He considered turning around and talking to his wife after hearing the terrible cry. However, the thought faded as swiftly as it arose. He was bored of hearing her comments because they had always proven out to be false. With weighty thoughts, every proclamation of love, touch, and smile appeared phony. Mike walked beyond the town. He walked west on Highway 64, passing a sign reading Winterset, population 246. "Damn Outback," he whispered beneath his breath. "Damn marriage. Why do I need this? Definitely." He returned to the road and resumed heading west. The gravel crunched underneath his sneakers. A small crescent moon hung on the horizon, and the stars twinkled brightly in the sky. The world was silent, except for the sound of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Mike felt a tremendous sense of relief, as if 1,000,000 pounds had been lifted off his shoulders. He had no further intentions or duties. He was free to live the way he chose. Behind him, he could hear a car approaching. The headlights illuminated his growing shadow on the road. The automobile slowed and approached from his left side. "Would you like me to offer you a ride?" asked a familiar female voice. "Jessica, what are you doing here? Why don't you return to the piano and leave me alone? I forgot they kicked me out just like you. I've got nowhere to go, exactly like you." Her crimson hair shone in the moonlight. "Why would you even want to go with me? I've let you down so bad. I forgive and forget everything. Besides, we arrived here together. Isn't it logical that we'd leave together?" He nodded, finding some truth in her comments. "If you're prepared to leave the past behind," Mike said, placing his backpack into the back of an ancient Dodge pickup and entering the cab. "Where do we go, Detective?" Jessica inquired, turning on the transmission. "Prepare for the sun. Sand or ocean?" he inquired after a little period of reflection. Jessica stared at him twice and smiled slowly. "Are you kidding? I am always ready. Then it is decided." California forward. Mike made a loud announcement. Jessica hit the throttle and the vehicle raced off, leaving Winterset far behind. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened.